This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of What If Naruto Became a Devil Against His Will. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
"We're done," concluded Rias with a sigh. She entered the kitchen and settled herself on the closest chair. He looked in the refrigerator out of habit and said, "I know, it felt like ages since we had some free time," but he didn't find anything he needed or desired. "Tomorrow, we'll go back to my home and see if the Hokage is back." "Okay," she said, pausing. "Is it okay if we talk about something?" She nodded. "We talk every day." Stillness. "Well, I'm not stopping you." If he had to be honest, he would prefer to put off discussing serious topics for a bit. After all, they had just left another meeting. But since it would be strange to sit across from Rias, he held back a sigh and leaned against the refrigerator. For any number of reasons. "I wanted to explain myself, again? Better." He gazed at the tiny window near the sink. With the options available, leaving would be simple. It wouldn't be necessary to say the next words. Then he muttered, "Fine," to ease the pain. He tapped his left foot. She scowled but went on. "It's about the day we met, and the day you turned into a devil." "Of course, what else would it be about?" Rias continued. "I thought so much about it lately. I can even see myself on the sidewalk, the faceless people around me, minding their own business. It was every day that I thought, if I turned any one of them, would they be able to help me? Sometimes, I would have a little hope. What if they had magical talent? What if they had a sacred gear? What?" When Rias stopped suddenly, her lips quivered and she inhaled. "It's just that, Riser has always been an expected part of my life, ever since I was a little girl. And, I'm just so happy that I never have to think about those things again," she said. With his finger digging into his arms, he bit his tongue to capture the brief words. Her actions weren't inexcusable. Even though it was impossible, it was difficult to listen to. He was compelled to consider the future. "So when you crashed into the road, blood gushing out from your stomach, she said without pausing. Rias added, "I couldn't help but notice your energy. I won't lie, and say that it had nothing to do with it. When you went still, I thought you died, so I did what you asked me not to." His fingers drummed across his lap. She remained quiet, anticipating. To be honest, he was at a loss for words. He didn't say anything for a long time. "I get it. You thought you knew better, when you didn't. I don't know if we'll ever be friends, but I don't really care." "I see," she said, her shoulders sagging. "That's the best I could hope for." "I guess," he said in a whisper. Her rigid shoulders relaxed in spite of what he said, and a small smile emerged. Did she have to appear so content with herself? He turned to go, saying, "I'm just going to go to my room," but a question stopped him. "Is it okay if I left for the school?" She didn't add anything, which was a good thing. "Haven't used my powers in a while. You're good, I think." He went back into his room after going down the hall. His face was covered by a blanket as he fell into bed. It had a soft, comforting, and new scent. As the door closed and was locked, Naruto heard her footsteps. He took his phone out and played with it. Issei recently sent him a message inquiring about his availability. Issei had another couple of hours at school, and Naruto hadn't had any free time in a long time. He heard someone knocking on the door a few minutes later. He could claim he left the keys somewhere and say, "She has the keys," unless she forgot it. Then he switched his phone off. When it went on, he sighed. He preferred to sprawl out on the clean sheets. A voice was heard, and it wasn't Rias's. It was sufficient to move him from the bed to the door. Not enough to make him complain and swear that he was pushed out of his comfort zone. A woman with cat ears was standing behind the door. A deep, revealing neckline and black hair. As they slithered around behind her, the tails and ears weren't phony. Finally, she exclaimed with a big, radiant smile. He nearly missed it because she spoke so fast. "Both of you are really inseparable. I thought we'd never get a chance to talk. Help me make babies, Naya." He gazed at the woman while blinking. He raised an eyebrow and shut the door after doing so. The reaction was almost automatic. It didn't make sense, of course. His hand hovered close to the handle as he hesitated. Once more, the door opened. "Oh," she chuckled. "Is that a yes?" He gazed at this odd individual for a long time. "Are you from the Leaf or any part from back home?" What does that mean? Any response would have been unclear. The girl's question made sense if she was from home. Except that she found him somehow after entering this dimension. There was something wrong. "Never mind, tell me, you're joking, right?" Why would I joke about that?" He retreated with a shirk. "Because only crazy people would say that. I have no idea who you are, and you don't know who I am. So, who the hell are you?" Her chest protruded as she folded her hands behind her back. He pushed her back into the hallway as she moved closer, saying, "I am Kuroka." and you are Naruto-kun. She whimpered, meanie. That's not going to happen, Naya, why not? How do you even know me? How did you even find me? And what do you really want? I'm Kuroka, and I know you from Valley.kun, and I want to have your babies. As if her head were a tomato, he squinted. His arms were crossed. I'm more creeped out than anything, he said. Valley, how do you know him? It is clear that Kuroka was not the fallen angel's commander. She grumbled, he's my teammate, I was there when you both fought. I'll save you time and say that I would never give you babies. Then, I'm just going to convince you, a man has needs, so we can help each other. Like a bothersome cat poking through trash, he pushed her away. Go away, I'm tired of people like you. She removed his hands with a swipe. I'm not the first. And I only need to have strong babies. Then he whispered, you're acting like that's not a big deal. Naruto pictured children running around, yelling obscenities, and carrying a child in his arms. Kuroka cocked her head and asked, did you ever say yes to one of them? Never, but you're much creepier than them. Stamping her feet, she said, no, I'm not. He wasn't persuaded. He said, ask someone else, and shut the door. Instant knocks. I can get you to meet someone important. When he heard it, he was heading for the kitchen. With a sigh, he went back to the door. You don't need to try hard to convince someone to have sex with you. But I want to have sex with you, a lot. Well, if you weren't a total creep about it, he said, trying to hide his blush as much as possible while adjusting his shirt. He was still unsure of how she had discovered him. What's this about meeting someone important? The leader of the Chaos Brigade, heard of them? She asked with a laugh. Never, and I still haven't heard from Valley, so I'm not talking to you until I meet this leader first. He shook his head and proceeded to close the door, but was halted when her foot pressed against it. Wait. So, if I do this, would you make strong babies for me? Why did girls always have to be so obnoxious? My answer won't change. Will you ever consider it? Fine, he sighed. Yay. I'll be back. I'm back, exclaimed Rias. The plastic bags crumpled together as she swung them in and shut the door behind her. Welcome back, murmured Naruto. He glanced back at the TV after glancing back from the love seat. It was a welcome surprise because he was frequently in his room. I hope their earlier conversation didn't bother him anymore. I got junk food and some soda. Instead of speaking, he stood and strolled to the location where she had placed the junk food bags. He gestured to the other bag and helped himself. Thanks, what's with the movies? Stacking them on top of each other, she brought them out. I was hoping we could watch one. There's even some Hollywood movies. She grinned and got ready for the film as he shrugged and said, sure, why not? She found a comedy movie, and he picked it. Their relationship appeared to have advanced significantly over the past few weeks. Naruto was correct. If she was too scared to do anything worthwhile, how could she have advanced? She struck up a conversation while the movie's commercials were playing. Did you do anything while I was gone? Not really, played games, but someone did come over today. Like who? With a pause, a supernatural. She's a catgirl, I guess, very weird too. She inquired, what's her name? A supernatural shouldn't be around here. He looked at her and said, well, you see, she's doing something for me. Apparently she knows someone that I would like to talk to. A knock on the door was heard. Great timing. I didn't feel like watching a movie with you. At least he was trying to be nice, but she puffed her cheeks. When the door opened and a young girl was inside, Naruto was the first to reach for it. She wore a pink frilly hairbow with her long black hair. Oh, murmured Naruto. The little girl was a supernatural, despite her odd and inquisitive appearance. Who were the individuals he had encountered? He asked foolishly, who are you? Where's, that girl? Nothing was said. The girl returned with merely a blink and a look, her eyes narrowed. Are you going to say anything? You're Naruto. You fought Valley. Naruto raised his eyebrows and took a quick look at Arias. She was limited to responding with a shrug. She didn't know who this individual might be. This meeting was arranged by Naruto. Yeah, he said, turning back to face the girl. I did. You're strong. How strong? To which Naruto answered, why does it matter? Can I at least get your name? All I know is that you're a leader of some group. Ophis. She recognized the name, but she wasn't sure why. Join me. Naruto answered, well, I can't join you, but I can help you. Do you think you're that powerful? I don't know the problem, but you do know how this works, right? I help you, you help me, then we're friends, allies, that's almost the same thing. Are you powerful enough to help me? Asked Ophis, squinting. Naruto's forehead quirked as he held back a sigh. All this diplomacy business is really getting on my nerves. You have a problem, show me what it is, and I'll solve it. Ophis straightened, as if he was happy. Come, was all she said. As she turned, a portal materialized right before her. She jumped inside and vanished into the unknown. After grinning at her, Naruto said, well, let's go check it out. Wait, you're actually going to follow her? Well yeah, she's important, I think. Besides, it's my duty to try and find allies out here. Yes, it made sense. Now that she considered it, they were already negotiating with the shinobi and the devils, so it would be challenging. I just have a bad feeling. You're crazy, Rias, now, come on, he said, pulling her toward the portal with his arm. It can't be so bad. I just can't place why her name sounds familiar, they said, finding their shoes and taking a step back from the rift's pale purple color. Maybe it's a bit common name here, maybe it'll come back, scowled Naruto. Are you sure it's a good idea to trust her? He breathed deeply. This is how trust works, okay. Are you gonna help or not? She nodded reluctantly, her lips pursed. Even though she couldn't really stop it, saying no would not improve her relationship with him in the slightest. He stepped with Rias, and the two of them entered together. From a riot of color to the background of a tastefully decorated apartment, she found traction on her feet and found herself gazing up at the sky. She felt as though she was looking through a thin sheen that encircled the entire world, and it reminded her of bubbles. Above, color and boundless space. There was a nearly black plate that resembled glass beneath her feet, and there were many pillars and other structures made of the odd rock scattered across the horizon. Ophis stood far away, staring at Naruto with a blank expression. For the first time, she spoke more than a few words as they got closer. She uttered, I want my silence, I want it back from that thing, it won't give it. It, aside from the towering pillars of angular rock, was nothing, looks peaceful here. Naruto gazed off into the distance, and Ophis followed suit. He questioned, just, what exactly stole it? Rias strained to see what she was missing and to hear. She heard the gusts a few moments later. They were strong and thick. A tiny dot in the distance followed. Nearly lost in the world's colorful haze. Muttering, Rias, dragons exist? The suggestion caused her to look at him with frightening clarity. Ophis stared at the horizon with a displeased expression. The legendary dragon Ophis. Ophis was the infinite dragon god, this tiny child. I remember where I heard the name now, she's a dragon. Well, if she isn't, that one is dragon, you know, wings and all. She sensed it and heard it. She heard the winds, like a drum being pounded, with each wing flap. Its size had tripled up ahead, and it continued to grow larger every second until it was directly above them. The dragon was the largest living, breathing creature Rias had ever seen, and she was filled with morbid fascination as she gazed up at it. From its wing, gusts of wind pounded down on her. She would have been knocked down if she hadn't managed to hold onto Naruto. When it landed, the ground shook, crumbled, and caused her to fall. It laughed, Oh Ophis. Have you returned? How thoughtful of you, as fear seized her heart and wouldn't let go. No, Ophis replied. Others are here with me, she said, gesturing to Naruto instead. Trembling, Rias stood up and gazed at the enormous red dragon. The only spot that offered a false sense of security was behind Naruto, so she grabbed his arm. It's safe to say you're not a little girl, mumbled Naruto. And I don't think this is something I can do right now, getting back your silence. With its red eyes fixed on them both, the dragon hummed. With a laugh, a girl too, she looks delicious. Murmuring, let's go, Rias, Naruto said. A huge claw yelled, hold on, in front of them. Rias stumbled and yelled. If Ophis is interested in you, then there's gotta be something special about you. Well, I said I can solve the problem she had, because I said it didn't matter what it was, said Naruto. Even then, there was a sharp edge to his voice, almost serene in the face of the large red dragon. Typical Ophis, and you, little human, what do you think now? Big Red asked with a smile before laughing. Well, maybe I can, maybe I can't. That's the funniest thing I've heard. It moved so incredibly quickly for its size that a claw reached for them. The hand struck the floor and she was pushed away. She looked back in the air and saw Big Red slamming another claw into the floor. You're like one of those flies. Naruto showed up and grabbed her waist before she could even consider calling his name. Out of the corner of her eye, a red tail swung at them, resembling a falling building. Even though it was completely dark when Rias closed her eyes at death, she could still hear the noises. When Naruto screamed, light appeared. When she opened her eyes, she saw that Naruto was dressed in black and gold, and that everyone else was similarly clothed. She heard the thunder cracks of falling rocks and heard another yell, this time from the dragon itself. It picked itself up, tumbling earth and boulders from its back as she stared after it. Even if she wanted to talk, she couldn't find the right words. I knew it. There was something, but I don't know you. Are you new? It laughed. Another was loud, rough, and disembodied. Damn, felt forever since I've done anything, and look, a flying lizard. Where had that voice come from? She saw it right away. A strange image of a fox creature she was inside was in front of her. Had she been devoured? Was Naruto in a similar predicament? Snap out of it! Exclaimed Naruto. She was startled out of her reverie and fixed her gaze on his azure eyes. She could see the earth farther below, but she could feel the firm ground beneath her feet. His attention was on the red dragon. It said, a lizard? That's something coming from a baby fox. Fuck you. A dark blue ball materialized and swiftly sped toward the dragon. It hit the dragon, and there was a huge explosion. What the fuck, Kurama? You don't need to make tea. A gasp. She was momentarily weightless as her head whipped forward and her teeth bit down on her tongue. Ow, Emtong, she muttered, covering her blood, tasting mouth. They cracked and there was another slam, the earth being torn apart. Naruto helped her stand up a moment later. He cleared his throat and shook his head. That felt like a meteor, Kurama's voice snarled. Didn't feel too good inside either, Naruto brought back. He gave her a quick glance. Her words, I'm bleeding, came out. You're fine, he said as he followed his gaze forward. Along the path where they had been thrown, she could see the ruined pillars and the unkempt earth. The red dragon was hundreds of feet away from them when they bounced. Woo! You should stop staring, puny fox, that was just a test shot. When you're so ugly, it's hard not to, exclaimed Kurama. Damn it, Kurama. Rias saw it coming this time. It was incredibly swift in spite of the distance and its size. It destroyed any rock that stood in its path. As it came to them, the dragon was struck in the head by the fox's clenched fists. Unflinching, Kurama grabbed its horns with both hands and slung it away as it slammed against the ground. Fat-ass lizard! Yelled Kurama. Boulders blasted off into the sky as she watched it crash in the distance. This was unthinkable. This fight. What was it? Hey, focus, okay, Naruto said, snapping his fingers in front of her face. All that mattered was that he was by himself. Just, he said with a shaky smile, remember what I said with that fallen angel. What was it he said? It stuck with her and wasn't difficult to recall. The only one allowed to hurt Rias Gremory would be me. She had never understood why it had stayed with her, not until now, she said, I remember, in a tremulous voice. Good, now, get ready to teleport when I say so, I can't fight this thing with you around. Now let's stick to the plan, Kurama, said Naruto. 3 flawless spitting images appeared next to him as his hands were brought together. She didn't comprehend the statement, there's 4 of you? As they descended toward the fox's hand, they remained silent and vanished. She got no attention from Naruto. Kurama laughed and said, whatever. What's the plan? How were they able to do it so fast and silently? Dust and debris flew into the air with every heave of the dragon's wings as it soared overhead, obscuring their surroundings. Fat, you're just a skinny little land roamer, it chuckled. I hope you don't mind we keep this short, another laugh. Oh, really? I hope that little devil is Fiend, the listener said. Rias was not entirely sure why it said that. Kurama yelled, besides, who needs wings to fly? With a hand that rose above its head, they stood on its hind legs and rose higher. A huge yellow sphere came to life in front of her. It was thrown at the dragon by Kurama. The dragon spun around the orb, but Rias believed it was a real shot. It was so big, like the sun had just been born, that it exploded behind it without causing any harm. Would it have been sufficient if it had struck? It jeered, ha, you missed, idiot. Sure, said Kurama and Naruto, unfazed. It wasn't until it started that Rias noticed, beneath the dragon, 3 more enormous glowing foxes emerged. 9 tails, mumbled Rias. Observing what looked to be a fox's tails behind it, that had escaped her notice. They pulled him farther away by grabbing hold of its wings and limbs, the sounds of the land being altered, and curses being hurled. Another one, said Naruto. Rias noticed a hand in front of him. The fox's palm held the same power as before. At that moment, Naruto was gone, and the light vanished. She yelled as she lost her footing as well. She was seized by a big golden hand before she could summon her wings. She was brought back to where Naruto was, which was inside the 9-tailed fox's chest. In the distance, she heard an explosion. Sorry, he replied, I forgot you can't even come with me. Breathless, she said, is it over? About that? That actually tickled. The dragon called out to her. After saying, "He's pretty crazy," Naruto concluded. Of course, it was terrible that the technique did not harm the dragon. Kurama mumbled, "There's one more thing," with a sigh, "Go ahead." When Kurama wiped its hand, the majority of the dust flew away, revealing a clear view in the distance. The horizon itself was the dragon. The other clones were no longer there. Kurama replied, "That was nothing more than a little shock. What about you? You might as well be a lizard if you can only fight with claws and tail." "Ha!" snorted Big Red. "That's the funniest thing I heard all week. If you want the might of me, then I'll show you." A deep sphere of blood formed in its mouth as its maw opened. A power building exercise. It made the air heavy and thick, making it difficult for Rias to breathe. Her heart felt like it might explode, and she was trembling now. Even though it was brief, it seemed to go on forever. "Shit, this is something else," he responded. "Rias, be ready." He removed the bandages from his hand and extended it. In order to impale straight down, Kurama dug its tails into the ground. Rias encircled Naruto with her arms and refused to release them. "Boom!" exclaimed the dragon. The red energy blasted in their direction. She kept thinking about everything she had been unable to express. Even though she was aware that it would never get to them. The explosion was not what she had anticipated. The glaring red light. The dragon's roaring. Then there was nothing but the awful ringing in her ears. She pressed her face against his. It smelled like him and reminded her that she was still alive. When the light went out, she opened her eyes to discover Kurama had also gone. She was caught and placed on her feet after they fell to the ground. It was all dust, and she could hardly see. Rias recalled the necessary action. Underneath them, the teleportation materialized, and she imagined a secure location. "Wow," Naruto exclaimed. He sounded distant. His shoulders tensed and then slumped as he stepped forward. "So, can we never share what happened with your brother?" he asked, turning to face her. That was the last thing she was thinking about. Rias's deep blue eyes were once filled with hate, but now they were filled with something else. Rias was tired of being the slow one and didn't want to be cautious anymore. He tilted his head in silent question as she approached him. She discovered her voice. After saying, "I love you," she gave him a kiss. She could taste the taste of his lips. Her trembling hands had encircled his neck as she pressed closer. It ended too soon. There was a faint hope that he wouldn't stop, even though it was expected. He said, "What the fuck," right away. He essentially tossed himself aside. His features gathered up and his brow furrowed as if he had tasted the worst thing. "I love you," she said once more. A beat skipped through her heart. With a long, intense look, Naruto asked, "Are you crazy? I don't get it." Her hands were trembling wildly. His eyes were telling, but she hadn't realized it. What's hard to understand? Did you even hear yourself? Do you realize how little that makes sense? She chuckled, "You're very cute when you're flustered, did you know that?" He winced. "Look, I don't get it. I haven't given any reason for you to even like me. Damn it, Rias, what is the matter with you?" He took a step back, and she took another. Her response was, "I don't think there's anything wrong with me." She inhaled nervously. Feeling the completely untamed drum inside, she put a hand over her heart. It had not subsided. She thought she might pass out. She was content in spite of everything. "Are you sure? I mean, like, you're not confused or anything like that?" She shuddered. "What? No, of course not. Why did she say that?" She admitted. "This is almost a surprise to me too, but I know that I love you." "You said that 3 times, I mean, why?" His words were cold and sharp. Even though it was expected, it still hurt. Her heart was jumping, but she wasn't sure if it was in pain, fear, or joy. It was getting worse because of her. 3 words undid all that progress. "I don't know, maybe it's how you always called me by my name. That you never once thought I was no one other than Rias Gremory. That you helped me when you didn't have to. I helped you because I'm forced to be around you, Riser." She stumbled. "How can you know that? You don't, do you? You would have been fine. All you had to do was not step in." He might have been a bully, but he couldn't be that cruel. She felt tears that was blinked away. Tell me if you feel even the slightest regret that you didn't step in, then I'll believe you. Tell me that would still step in, and do everything the same again." He was silent, his lips pressed together. "You see," she said in response, "you're not that cruel. I hear what they say about you, that you're funny, that you're caring. I notice that everyone here loves you, so much so that they gather round you and ask for your autograph and all you do is smile and talk to them without any complaint." It was difficult to speak. "All I want is for you to treat me the same way you treat all your friends." Despite her best efforts, the tears continued to fall. She feared that he would either yell and say more hurtful things, or leave. Rather, he spoke softly, his words hurried and strained, thoughtless. "What do you want me to say? That I love you and that everything will be okay until the day it isn't?" She exclaimed. "I don't know, okay. Everything that I want to hear doesn't make any sense coming from you." She tried so hard not to cry. The reason it went on was still a mystery to her. Rias continued to stare at him. "Rias," he uttered quietly. He turned his head away from her, and his shoulders were relaxed. "Why are you such a big baby?" She laughed somehow. To be honest, she thought that everything would spill. One more shove and she would explode. He whispered, "You know," as his hands broke the drapes. Even though it was dark outside, the village was illuminated. "In a strange way, I'm a little jealous of you." "That's weird," he smiled. She was heavy. "You feel so strongly about stupid things." "That's not stupid, me loving you," she sniffed. He remained silent for a long time. She stopped crying. He wasn't running, he wasn't screaming. He was still alive and appeared to be in good spirits. "You should get some sleep. I don't think today is something you're used to." It became so quiet that she failed to notice. But he was correct. She was worn out and shaken. She never imagined feeling so overpowered. The only sounds she could hear were her heartbeat and the whine in her ears. She whispered, "You're not going anywhere, are you? This glass would shatter if it were any louder." She located his door and opened it, the wood creaking. She didn't think he would speak. "No," he replied, "and Rias, there's not a single part of me that regrets what I did." She collapsed onto his bed as the door clicked behind her. She let out a sigh of relief and was unaware that she had fallen asleep. As they passed him, the faces of the people blurred into a jumble. In order to continue, he muttered back their greetings and waves. "I cherish you." He crossed his arms and flexed his fingers, which felt shaken and rigid. It felt too passive, but he pushed his arms to his sides. "Oh," she replied. She gestured to the left with her delicate hand. There was a street full of vendors down the path. People were shopping and talking to each other. "Can we check it out?" He shrugged, but it wasn't a definitive response. Sure." Grinning, Rias turned the corner. She swerved between the people. She was easy to see because of her height and hair. He wondered what she was thinking about. She hardly seemed like the anxious mess she was the night before. With her back to him, she came to a halt. Then Rias laughed. It was a melodic, light laugh. She abruptly shoved something in his face, causing her hair to whip. She laughed once more and said, "They actually make figures of you." Frowning, "Oh God," he said. Her hands trailed the figurine as she began to spit. "It's so cute. Look at your little feet." Why was it saying, "It looks nothing like me, and stop playing with it, it's weird"? The owner was the next to interrupt. She quickly brought down any items that resembled him. "Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I'll stop selling them until I get better, I promise." Naruto was enraged. When Rias said, "Don't mind him," she mentioned the figure once more. "He's just embarrassed," she said. "It looks like him, just not as cute as the real one." "Why are you like this?" Naruto uttered. They didn't pay attention to him. Oh, is it okay?" It said the woman. "Gimme that," he said, stealing the figurine from Rias. Upon closer examination, he noticed the resemblances with the small doll. "It's good," he said. Rias returned his gaze by staring at him. "Let's buy it." "What? And no way. I cherish you. I've given you an allowance, and..." sulked Rias, imagining a tiny stamp of her feet. "All right, I get it, geez," he said, taking out his cash and giving it to the grateful and relieved vendor. Once more, they strolled down the street. As they descended farther, the vendors were less crowded. He gave the girl a sidelong glance and said, Can you at least not have it out?" She remarked, "I wanted to show it to the others," he asked, and she complied. What was she thinking now? He wondered. "What's with you? I thought you'd be, I don't know, weirded out from last night." She gazed up at the sky, turning from green to blue, and asked, "Do you know how hard it is to confess to someone?" Naruto remained silent because he was unable to admit he knew. "It's one of the harder things I've done." He muttered, "I was no help either." He was aware of his crossed arms once more. However, everything felt off. Nothing felt normal. Since it was a lose situation, he refused to respond to the question, "What about you, or are you too manly for love?" Therefore, by not responding at all, he might as well lose. "I cherish you." Once more, Rias ran ahead. Naturally, he was involved once more in this. He looked down at the painting of him as she leaned forward. In the light, her lips glinted. How soft those lips were when they were on his the other night. Rather than avoiding it, his thoughts turned to last night. It had helped, and it would help. He was still thinking about her confession, of course. He cherished his friends, the village, his teachers, Ichiraku, his parents, and ramen. He could enumerate countless things. This was different, more than he had anticipated. How much his mother cherished his dad. His love for those other things was different. It was clear from her kiss. I cherish you. He came up with an answer, but it didn't help. Now they were in another place. He was unaware. The market and stands had vanished, replaced by streets that led to surrounding shops. You look lost, said Rias. He lied when he said, I'm thinking of my mission. He didn't give her a glance. That fox that appeared, you called it Kurama, right? Yeah, are you? She asked pausingly. Him? In some way, it was amusing that he laughed and said, no, we're different. He lives inside me. Oh, it's just, Ophis could turn into a human form. To think that he would have strongly objected to the proposal years ago. Kurama could think on his own, and he doesn't like other people much. Oh, what does he think of me? She scowled as he laughed. He doesn't think you're much different from us here, in his words, like rats with wings. That isn't very nice, she said, puffing her cheeks. He reasoned, no it isn't, he's an ass, often. Naruto peered inside. Kurama was drooling everywhere and snoring. I cherish you. Oh, Naruto-kun, I heard you were back. His lips became parched. That voice was familiar to him. On the other hand, he found it to be melodic. Almost every sound here felt that way since he'd come back. He was thinking about someone else. Naruto turned to face the voice. He couldn't explain why she looked different. Hinata Hyuga's eyes were soft and white. He would frequently ask himself how a girl like her became a kunoichi. Hinata, he whispered. All he could think about was the day the village would be destroyed. The way she looked from the corner of his eye. How her hair flowed behind her as she flew down. Smile softly, I thought you'd be okay, you always come back. He couldn't imagine her yelling either, but she spoke softly. Yeah, he replied. Naruto forgot to speak because he was so unsure of what to do with his hands. He was thinking about more than just Rias' confession. Oh, hello, explained Rias. She moved ahead of him. Hi, my name is Hinata Hyuga, Rias Grammary. It's nice to meet you. Fortunately, it was sufficient for him to find the right words to introduce them both. Rias is from another place, from another dimension. So, there's that, her brother is a big shot, said Naruto. He looked away from both the other person and Hinata. He turned his gaze elsewhere instead. Oh, she said, blinking. How strange, but it's not surprising that you made friends. He glanced at Rias and said, sure, in response. Rias inquired, how do you know each other? We went to the academy together and we were in the same class, Hinata said. They exchanged words. Oh, sorry, I forgot to add it's a shinobi academy. Of course, they'd get along. I cherish you. Either he had no idea where he was going with this, or he was the biggest idiot. It was odd because he had been that foolish all this time. Naturally, he interpreted it incorrectly. He would have thought differently if his life hadn't been as it was. Parentless and alone, but it wasn't. Saying, hey, Hinata, her gentle eyes flitted to him as she hummed. He paused and said, it's nice to see you, but we gotta head back and see the Hokage, after that. We should hang out earlier, if I get the time. With a smile, okay, and I'd like that, tomorrow, at noon, Ichiraku? She waved goodbye and said, I can do that, before leaving. On the way back, Naruto led the way. His chest twitched, as if it were about to give way, if that made any sense. Rias inquired, is there something the matter? Fear and apprehension were concealed behind worried eyes. A breath, just, a little thing. The fear vanished as the question, oh, is there something I can do to help? Was replaced by eagerness and, perhaps, love. He bit his lip and turned away. Like I said, it's not much to worry about. Between them, there was silence. He was grateful because he thought his head might blow up. The back of his head ached from everything that had happened since yesterday and even before. Deeper and deeper with each second that goes by. Fortunately, they were close to his apartment. Via the gates, inside, through the door, and up the stairs. The apartment didn't feel empty, but it did feel weird. Rias was right behind him. He declared, I'm going to take a nap. Oh, we're not going to see the Hokage? I pretty much stayed up all night fixing my report. Hokage isn't going anywhere, he said, gesturing to the pile of papers on the coffee table. Okay, I'll just watch a bit of TV. Before entering his room, he placed his jacket on a love seat. It no longer felt as much like his room, and it had a different smell. Rias's clothes were packed in a bag, and some perfume was on his desk. The scent of the girl who confessed to him even permeated the bed. He was lying in his home's dimly lit room. He partially buried his face in the pillow. Slowly the dark tendrils scuttled in his direction. He had heard Hinata and Rias confess. He raised his head and then dropped it repeatedly. In Kurama's words, "You look like an idiot, you were drooling on the floor not too long ago. Except you're doing it intentionally." Kurama chuckled. "So, you're saying you're an idiot? Wait, never mind, then." Naruto kept quiet and went on. "Just thinking of yesterday." Kurama exclaimed. "I was wondering what got my partner distressed. I would have thought you'd be yelling at the girl like usual." "How would you know that?" "Same way whenever I influenced you when you became a ninja." It was very logical. Murmuring, "Our world and theirs are different," Naruto said. 3 different groups, and now we're in it too." Among them, he was in an unusual position. He was a devil himself, but he wasn't with the devils. "Don't change the subject, this is about the girl." "What about her?" "She's too much, and it isn't about her, sort of. It's about being with a girl," he said. It was an odd notion. "I don't know. I would never ask for my friends to turn in devil. I don't think they would willingly choose it. They have their own friends, their own family. Being a devil, you're different. I don't know, I can't fall in love with a girl here." "Well," hummed Kurama, "there's always those others." "I guess, naturally," he laughed when he said, "there's a girl in the room right next to yours if you really want that." He made the incorrect decision by saying, "Shut up, never mind. The Hokage ought to see him." Rias had chosen to wait outside rather than accompany him. There was no question that Kakashi would summon her if she was needed. "How did it go?" inquired Kakashi. He picked up the report folder and set it on the oak desk by itself. Naruto gave his neck a gentle rub. He was still unsure of where to begin and felt weird. Kakashi wanted a brief conversation, but he had written the majority of the report. "I got to talk to several factions. I met the leader of the Chaos Brigade. I don't know much about them. I also met a person who's with the Fallen Angels but haven't met with the leaders. No luck with the Angels." "Impressive," said Kakashi. "That will make it easier for us in the future. Find out more on that group. Anything else I should know?" "There's dragons." "Dragons? Dragons, and they're powerful. I got into a little scuffle with one, you can thank Kurama, and he just ignored my massive Rasen shurikens." "We can't afford to make enemies," he said, narrowing his eyes. "As far as I know, that dragon is alone. I guess I'm on friendly terms with the other dragon, the leader of the brigade," said Naruto. "Besides, that dragon was playful, I guess." "Playful? Bored? I don't know, I was trying to protect Rias." Kakashi turned to the window and sighed. "I suppose everything going perfectly was a fool's dream. We'll see how it plays out." His hair was brushed by a hand. "You'll continue with coming and going with our guest, but there's another mission for you." "This about the 5-cage meeting?" A smile. "We decided on a course of action. I'll spare you the details, and of their opinions of how you handled the situation. Your duties of being a liaison will be given to another." It was what Naruto had anticipated. Shikamaru would be a suitable candidate. Kakashi added, "The other cage wanted to be more involved. Your new duty to be a retainer. That someone will be the Mizukage herself." "What?" he exclaimed. "Really? You won't be the only one, of course. Retainers from the other villages will be used. Your focus will be mainly to attend to our guest. The other cage have also supplied us their sealing masters to help us with your problem." "Wow. They're doing that?" replied. "Have the Saiyans know we'll have one of our own leaders meeting them for next week. After that, you're free to do what you want, but I would ask you to attend the Mizukage's arrival in several days." "You're free to go, Naruto. The 5th said she wanted to meet with you at the hospital. Be sure to see her tomorrow at the latest." Though he had considered someone else, he hesitated before leaving. The day would be tomorrow. She inquired, "How have you been doing?" Through the crowded street came her quiet voice. The urge to claim that he was all right and feeling good was strong. Something else sputtered out of his mouth, but he didn't want to worry her. Her brows furrowed as she said, "I don't know, I feel like I'm out of my element," with a look in those pale eyes. "What? It's true." Hinata inquired, "Is there any way I can help?" It seemed possible, and there was a comforting smile. He should have brought it up, but he was scared of the response and the foolish thing he would do. Fighting enemies on the battlefield was one thing. Dealing with a love life was quite another. "I don't know," he said haltingly. He didn't talk, even though he wanted to. Naturally, he was unable to speak to her while Rias was seated nearby, on a different table. "I don't think it could never be." She looked bewildered and said, Sorry, I didn't catch that." "It's nothing." He turned back to face the other table. Rias met his gaze, and rather than averting her eyes, she fixed them. Naruto looked straight ahead. Another customer was being served with joy by Ayame. This location was missed by Naruto. Hinata had returned to her ramen bowl. Before he vanished, he had spent a number of times with her. If Naruto stayed, he had to wonder how much higher that number would be. She finished her bowl, and they resumed their small talk. "I have to go," said Hinata. "My father wanted to see me. Should we do this again?" "Yes," he said without thinking. "Whenever I get the time." "Of course, the duty to our village comes first. If you see any one of our friends, can you tell them I'm around?" he inquired. He watched her go again after she gave him a joyful nod. To try to unwind, he ordered another bowl. Comfort food helped him relax a little. Behind him, Rias spoke to someone. He could hardly hear Rias because the boy was so noisy. "Naruto?" He turned around on the chair and asked, "Yeah?" He glanced at the other boy and froze. She said, "I'm finished. Are we going soon?" "Sure," said Naruto. After stuttering an apology, the boy fled. After paying for their meals, Naruto left with Rias by his side. "Now, where are we heading?" "To see the other Hokage." She nodded and fell silent, which, to be honest, began to irritate him because she was now doing that so frequently. "You're a lot quieter," he stated, "sometimes away, keeping space." "I am," a smile, and then silence. "Are you going to explain it?" He scowled. "As a representative of my homeland, I am a foreigner here. If I'm around, your friends won't be themselves. I want you to feel at home because you missed them." The only thing he could say was, "Thank you," he muttered. "That's the second time, but this time it's not about food," he said, describing the smile on her face as radiant and delighted. She chuckled. He experienced a brief tug at his lips. As they drove to the hospital, she asked him questions, and he didn't mind answering them, no matter how many. He went straight to the front desk when they arrived, where he was given directions to the clinical ward and the precise location of her. "I'll be back," Rias said, not turning to face her, but imagining the smile on her face. When he knocked on one of the doors, he heard Granny say to wait, and after a few long minutes, a sickly woman came out, ignoring him as she left. "Ah, there you are. I was wondering when you'd show up," Tsunade replied. He observed that her gaze shifted behind him, but after the door closed, it returned to him. "Granny," he said, noticing the instant changes from his previous meeting. She appeared more at ease. "Well, it's nice to see you too, brat," she said with a smile, reaching out to scuff his hair after saying, "You got a little bit taller since I last saw you, not counting the last time." "At least you're sober, for now," said another sly smile. It was unbelievable that he had not noticed the change. Maybe he had been away from home for too long and was too joyful to pay attention to details. "So," Tsunade went on, "how is that girl going?" Sighing, he said, "She confessed to me." He smelled the alcohol, and a spray of whatever liquid she had been drinking flew out of her mouth. "Are you intoxicated?" "Never mind that. Coffee? I guess some of my worries were for nothing then," Tsunade said, laughing. "Are you interested in her, please?" What? How can you say that at all?" He uttered those words. "She's a young woman in bloom, and you're a young man." "Don't think I've noticed," Tsunade said, taking another sip of her coffee, and using a rag to clean the counter where she had spilled. "Do," he said, pausing, "do other girls do that?" He was shocked to hear her sigh, which was a clear sign of disappointment. "You're an idiot." "That's not helping." "Hey kid, tell me why you brought this up." "Because I detested her from the beginning, goddammit, it is illogical." "Anticipated, given whatever happened to you. You mentioned that you were compelled to remain near each other since you turned, so perhaps she sees something in you. At least, until you're free," she said, pulling one of Rias's chess pieces out of her pocket. "Suck it up for now." He gazed at it for a long time, losing sight of his initial goal. "What did you discover?" "Its signature is as similar to yours as we could make it. It may be exclusive to the devils, so we can't duplicate it. The information you obtained for us was helpful in part. It is intended to transform a person, much like how you attain your sage mode in practice. However, we're not sure if it's permanent or if it will go away after removal." When he heard the word permanent, most of the words vanished, and he swallowed hard. "Permanent? We don't know, as I mentioned. It would make sense if it were a transient vessel that remained in its new home after finding a suitable host." Rias sat in the waiting room, conversing with a mother and child, while Naruto approached the blinds and peered out of them. He said, "Like sage mode," and she nodded. Even now, as he lay motionless and at ease, he felt the pull, its feel. His hands were wrapped around the window sill. A little pressure and he could break the wall. It was similar to training with Kurama's chakra. He thought of his master, the elderly toad Fukasaku. Then he let it go, and the familiar symptom of fatigue struck him, but he couldn't help but think that maybe that was how it operated. He was inside his partner's flood, clogged, humid cage, and Kurama was awake, listening to the outside world. Gnome the fox had been listening. "Kurama," he said, gasping for air, "what do you suppose?" He clarified his ideas. "It's worth a shot, but what?" he inquired. "I don't believe it's that easy. Perhaps I am a part of you, just like you are. If I'm forced out of you, I could kill you. The outcome might be the same." After giving it some thought, he decided to try forcing it out. "It's better than doing nothing, but I'm sick of waiting. What if there is a problem? Rias, she'll help me," he scowled. Kurama laughed. "Now using her? She made a promise," he explained. "I don't think she's doing anything." "Naruto," said Tsunade. He jolted back to reality as the granny held a piece of paper and took slow, but frequent, sips from her spiked mug. "I think I have a few things to say before you start whatever you're considering. First, I've scheduled a meeting with you for Tuesday at 9 a.m. Second, obtain additional copies of these works. Third, don't hurt her feelings so much that she will act foolishly." He assumed it was a joke, but based on her appearance, it wasn't. "Okay," he said haltingly. "Love is something else," she said quietly, turning to face the window that showed the village. "I'm not sure how genuine it is," she said. "You can hardly express it in words once you've experienced it. Their flaws are gone, and the days are far too short, so you feel whole." Not daring to speak, he swallowed deeply. "Don't let it build," she advises. "I'm gonna try." With his back to the door and his hands shaking strangely, Naruto quietly walked out, closing the door behind him, sensing that she wanted to be left alone. He was aware that Tsunade had once loved someone and that it had ended in bloodshed. She was killed in a war that also claimed her brother, and Naruto never wanted to experience the loss she went through. It was odd, because he couldn't help but long for the affection his parents had for each other, the way Tsunade once felt. It was the most peculiar thing. "Your explanations are boring and awful." "No, they aren't," she sighed. She was unsure of the frequency of her detailed explanations. "Just follow my instructions and you should be able to get it down in no time," she said. Ultimately, all he would say was that it was illogical. He responded, "Your teaching abilities could use some work." He got up from where they were sitting and stretched. Sweat clung to Naruto's hand as he wiped it off with a cloth as he wept. It was rather cool, not overly hot. "This won't work, you're not giving up, are you?" She scowled. "No," he said, rolling his eyes, "we're going to one of the training grounds." She stood with him and asked, "Why?" Everything inside appeared to be operating smoothly. Maybe he just needed some air. "We need a bigger space." Rias held back a sigh. It was pleasant to be in his apartment, which was quite cozy. Any plants that had withered away while he was away had been replaced. In addition to strange trinkets and framed photos, the apartment was littered with a sizable number of weapons. She put on their shoes and went out into the street with him. She occasionally saw children carelessly jumping along the rooftops. She was unknown. No one recognized her or acknowledged her beauty, and the name Gremory had no meaning. The thought of him caused her heart to beat a little quicker. How brave he was. Was it just for her that he had carried that worry? It was a cliché to say, you actually failed with your promise, but she needed to be sure. "Oh yeah, how? That dragon hurt me, it made me bleed." "If you count biting your own tongue, sure," he snorted. "That's only because we were hit by it, that counts." "Okay, you got me, I'm a failure," he waved his hand, "my first and last promise." Puffing her cheeks, she paused and said, "Never mind, it doesn't count." "Oh goody, you're a real knight, aren't you? You even have the golden shining armor," she said, catching up to him. His features were obscured by his accelerated gait, so she didn't see his reaction. It was probably her imagination, but she might have seen a blush. "I guess I could have been a true dragon slayer back then." "Did you think you could have defeated it? Why does it matter?" He scowled. "You mentioned it. I'm sick of discussing fighting. I've only been having issues because of it. Did you not notice that after I fight one guy, he starts another? Again and again and again." "Oh," she said, blinking, unsure of how to proceed. "You don't like fighting?" "It's just other things," he shrugged, his jaw set and shoulders tense. Rias could tell he no longer wanted to discuss it. She could think about it. The topic disturbed him. A chain of events that began with a single altercation. "Are you blaming me? It began with me, didn't it?" she inquired. His lips pressed together. "I'm a bigger problem," he said. He started to unwind as much as he usually does around her as they traveled through the village, but this time it was different. Are you angry at me? He used to sigh or simply ignore her, and she wondered if he ever got bored of speaking to her. No, but he appeared preoccupied. On the way, he made a stop at what looked like a school, where a group of children were yelling at each other. He leaned against the chain link fence and gazed longingly. Look at that. I became a shinobi at that academy, he pointed, or more accurately, in the same vicinity. It's newer, but it still has the name and everything. It was rebuilt, then? A nod. Children noticed them in a chorus, and each one demanded something different, a new method or another demonstration. But he said he couldn't. They persisted in spite of their disappointment, and he cheered them up by promising to return in a week or two. As they left the walls, the buildings became fewer and lower, and eventually the trailing paths gave way to grass and trees as they led her through the village. The only other noticeable features were small targets pinned to trees, and the surroundings appeared somewhat scuffed, whether it was from strange fallen leaves or broken branches in the trees. He remarked, "This one looks empty." She could feel the ground rumbling and heard distant noises, a training ground. She flinched at the smoke explosions as he stretched and pressed his fingers together. The field and the forest were filled with hundreds of him, copies of Naruto, which she hadn't anticipated. "Oh," she said, observing as numerous individuals made the decision to stand or sit, each sporting focused expressions. "It'll be faster this way. How does that operate?" "They all gain knowledge and experience. Practice makes perfect, you know." He chose to sit against a tree rather than join them, but she could stare at anything she wanted and it wouldn't be suspicious. "It's too different for me. What is it? This energy you're trying to teach me to control. Maybe you're a bad teacher, who knows," he said, teasingly, but with a smile. "I knew my own powers, and how to control them. This one is unique. I need to come up with something." "I see," she said. A few minutes later, she saw a number of them burst into smoke. Naruto shifted his weight and she saw a grimace. His shoulders and chest started to rise and fall noticeably with each breath, and when too many clones dispersed, he would take a breath and call forth more. He was affected by whatever was going on. Then she recalled that he had collapsed at the party when he attempted to summon it. "I'd die for anyone here." He began to shake. She wanted to tell him not to push himself too hard, but she remembered those words. She needed to help him. Drawing attention to it wouldn't help. "You've been doing this for how long? Are you a ninja?" "It took me a long time to respond," Rias said. "As you can see, I enrolled in the academy at the age of 6. 6 of the 13 years were spent as a ninja. That's a long time to live." That was normal, she thought, so young. She was straying from the subject, but she couldn't help it. "You don't seem very ninja. Like, I'd imagine black clothes and a mask, or even armor," she said. This place was different, training ninjas at such a young age. Rias recalled visiting a zoo at that age. It was no wonder he was so good at fighting. How quickly he could build his energy. "We'd stand out if we dressed like that during the day," he laughed. "It is expected of us to dress appropriately for our environment." "Why? So, we can blend in, duh." He appeared to be in a better mood, but it was only for a moment. "Oh," she said, running out of things to say. "Tell me about your friend, Sasuke, was it?" "Yeah, he's my best friend," he said. "He almost killed me several times. We took others' arms off and almost died." "How awful," Rias went dough. Well, there were other leaders, right? Are any of them familiar to you?" "Gaara, he's my age," he said with a smile. "Despite his busy schedule as the Cage, he is a good friend. We made several attempts to murder one another." "Did friends try to murder each other?" Naruto was making it very hard for himself by trying to look normal, his eyes tightly closed and his knuckles white. But she kept thinking about how he had forgiven them for attempting to murder him. "You have been attempting to be Hokage for how long?" "That? Honestly, I don't even know. Ever since I could remember I always wanted to be Hokage," he said, taking a deep breath and gazing up at the sky. Then she understood why he still hadn't forgiven her. "It's kind of weird thinking about it now," he said, laughing a little and smiling slightly. "Over time, my motivations have evolved. I need to improve and see the wider picture. In order to prevent children from having to live without their parents." Rias could only think about his dreams and the hardships he would endure to realize them, while Naruto seemed less concerned and regained his quiet resolve. He should have anticipated it, especially after practicing earlier, and staggered back, nearer to safety. He heard a question, and maybe it had been asked before, and he hummed, indicating that the question should be repeated. "Are you alright?" Instead, he concentrated on getting close to her. "It'll pass," he said, feeling the pressure of his chest, like it would collapse, and the heavy weight of his heart swinging. She said, "If you're sure," with hesitation. One of the final symptoms before he recovered was a terrible chill. He sat down on the closest suitable object and took a long time to react. He was only a few blocks away. Naruto glanced at Rias sitting by one of his clones down the street. It was much worse whenever he went too far, rather than attempting to reach it. His words, "We can't go further than this, I suppose," came as he dipped into an empty alley. He could hardly look at Hinata as her wide eyes met his. "What did you want to talk about?" He didn't know where to begin. "I had to face things since I became a devil." He should have considered this before he wanted to speak with her. He was avoiding the problem. Maybe this wasn't the right place to begin, but every time he came up with another, it didn't seem right either. "I wanted to discuss the time of Nagato's village attack, what you told me." She widened her eyes and quickly looked away. "Oh, what exactly about?" "I'm in a very difficult situation. I will live a very long time." It didn't seem so unrealistic, even Kurama thought so. "And what you saw earlier is what happens to us when we turn into a devil," he sighed. "It's not a life to live. I might not even become Hokage," he said. She had family, he didn't. It might not even have worked between them, it was too weird to consider. He gazed out to the street of the passing haze of legs, but he heard nothing, muffled by his heart in his ears. Hinata said, "I understand. Maybe if this hadn't happened." "I hope I'm not interrupting, but this is an important matter," said Ananbu. "No, we were just finishing up," Hinata said. "Yeah," he concurred. "You were and always will be my friend," she said, turning to face him. "That won't alter." The Mizukage stood off to the side, having already dismissed her entourage. They would have to wait here, and their stay would be covered. Kakashi could use some time off. For a moment, he regretted accepting this position. He could be reading porn at home instead. Let's get back to the important things, like their interactions with another realm. Naruto Uzumaki's return caused these issues one day. "I think this might do some good, if you want to look at it from another perspective," Meitarumi said as she ran a hand down her long auburn hair while gazing at the Hokage's portraits. "How?" "As it did against the Akatsuki, the discovery of another realm with unknowable military power would bring our nations together once more. The smaller nations might be more willing to join our forces." Although her ideas were valid, Kakashi briefly felt sorry for her, saying, "Going by that, then we can't rule out that these devils might consider a similar approach." He then signed off on the report and put it aside. "True, though judging on Naruto's report, their armistice is tenuous." She nodded and he said, "From his perspective, that's still only one faction, and leaves us with two." They had already discussed it at the summit, where the Raikage had demanded a military demonstration of their strength, involving a more violent approach to which the other Cage only partially agreed. Ultimately, they had reached a number of agreements. Naruto may have had some interaction with their fallen angels. "Here's the new report," he said, pressing it forward, and she took it from the desk. "Their dimension appears to have strength comparable to that of tailed beasts." Before Naruto showed up by himself, she perused it. Rias Gremory was undoubtedly in the vicinity. "Hey, the Mizukage is here. Why, the hero is involved, and, it's just May. It's been quite some time," she said with a smile. "Sure has, Naruto. I called you here so that the Mizukage can meet our guest," Kakashi said, clearing his throat to draw their attention to any superfluous conversation. "I've also arrived with our best seal masters," said the fifth, "so that they can lend a hand. The other Cage are doing the same." "Wow," his glowing eyes said. "Really? Many thanks. Some positive news would be greatly appreciated." My, such enthusiasm," she laughed. "I wouldn't be shocked if I were in your shoes, however, it might help me with some of my own issues," she sighed. "Quiet." "Well," said Kakashi, "Naruto, the fifth, has an appointment tomorrow at noon. Don't pass it up. Make the most of your 3 days of free time before everything gets hectic." "How does one rise to the position of Cage in their community?" she asked. Although her gaze was fixed on the TV, her thoughts were elsewhere. She was thinking about her brief encounter with Meitarumi, which was full of confidence in the duties of a leader. "They have to be respected by the village, but I guess they're usually powerful too," Naruto said, leaning his legs over the edge of the love seat. Naruto certainly matched that description. She wanted to ask, but her mind was also racing, and she looked at him, but he was staring out the window and appeared preoccupied all day. "I had a better look at the village, and it reminded me of Japan." The real one was in the room, but there was a channel that made her pay half attention as well. It looked like Naruto singing with a woman on TV, and the music was classical in style. He raised his head, and she added, "Not modern Japan, but older." "Yeah, whenever I saw pictures of those kinds of places, I was always reminded of home," he said, his eyes growing aloof. "They kept the architecture, because it's still culturally significant, but they did modernize it." He said, wow, which indicated that he wasn't really listening. Rias thought of her savior. It was true then, all those times when he said so. He must have been terribly homesick. Rias still recalled the lightness and easy grins when he first returned. He didn't seem so interested in the odd similarities between Japan and his home. What's wrong? Did he ask? He never asked what was bothering her, and she was at a loss for words, so she flinched at the question as well as the sudden noise. He waited, and she chose to go for it. I was just thinking about you really did mean what you said, those times you helped. Rolling his eyes, he said, well, obviously. You did it for your dreams. Well, I really don't like it when people try to take away other people's freedom. Why are you bothered by that? He shrugged. I just thought you would have done it for me, or to improve our relationship. What else is new? I let you down. She couldn't stop laughing, and then he grinned, which really did help. What are you doing? Or attempting to do? He yawned. I'm reading my mission dossier, although he had been looking at a document on his lap the entire time. She exclaimed, oh, that's so cool, as her thoughts shifted between images and technology. Naruto looked at her questioningly, as if he could read her mind. Yeah, that's what I thought when I first started, he said, displaying multiple pages with only text on them. I'm bored wondering what to do, he said, closing the folder and tossing it across the room on top of a desk. If you leave me here, I don't mind. You can hang out with your friends. There's enough interest in what you have on TV. No, that isn't going to work. You see, I can't get very far when I use a lot of chakra. I haven't figured it out yet, so it's kind of a toss-up until when things return to normal. Perhaps I can come with you and maybe hang back, she said softly, biting her lip. You know, I found some interesting things back in that dimension, he said, his eyes averted, similar to all of these English proverbs. What is the connection between this and it? You said so yourself, my friends aren't normal around you. After they discovered who she was and why she was in this dimension, she couldn't help but frown. After saying, it's like you're the broken spare tire in the trunk, he burst out laughing. Stop teasing me, she pleaded. You can invite them here, and I can hide away in your room. It will get busy soon, and I don't know when it will calm down, he said, rubbing his neck as he stopped laughing and stared at her with his arms crossed. Come on, we need to get some stuff. It sounds like a good idea. Why do you hide inside? I thought, you look pretty miserable, he grumbled. Stop doing everything you can to please me, I don't need it. He would be furious if she did what she wanted, which would be kissing him. He took hold of her wrist and dragged her from the room. Is Hyuga here? Naruto said. Hinata said she was busy tonight, but he released her too quickly and pointed her in the direction of another woman, a blonde, who was seated on one of the love seats. This is Ino, he said. It's a PLE. She had to regain her equilibrium after being bumped. Come on, just act normal, he said, on second thought, not so normal. And here I thought you would turn more into gentleman, he said, glaring at the woman, Ino, who had interrupted. Go on, I got it from here, he said. In any case, there are only boys present at the moment. Where's, she turned to Rias and said, so, I'm Ino, seems like you both know each other pretty well. Forehead said she will be stopping by, late night at the hospital, Ino said, saluting and wondering if there were any other friends present. Kiba Inuzuka was the only other person here, minus his dog. I'm not shocked. I suppose so, she said with a smile that didn't feel natural. Oh, look, here comes Shikamaru. A tall man with dark hair and a ponytail entered through the door as she looked at it, and Shikamaru waved back. All right, Naruto, what did you do now? You say those words to me right away. All right, everyone who truly knows you wondered where you got off to. It was only a question of when you got back, Shikamaru sighed. I simply have a gut feeling. You have weak senses? After they wandered off into the kitchen, she was unable to catch much more. All of you have a lot of faith in him, she continued. He's just like that, I suppose, Ino smiled, but you want to know something else? When we were younger, he was a bit of a dork. Really? Her eyes widened. What are you saying? It's difficult to believe, but he was dead last in our class, she laughed. He was a big joker who would pull practical jokes and even paint on the monument, claiming to be the Hokage. Wow, Rias said, wanting her to go on, and she listened intently. She let out a sigh and fell silent for a while, saying, most of us thought he was good for nothing, adding that no one gave him any attention, but now all the girls wanted him. It's really strange to observe. Really? Naruto was attractive, so hearing that was odd. Well, how about you? Did Ino ask? Me? Yeah, you're a significant person, right? She was ashamed to tell someone who was unfamiliar and not an earthly human, the daughter of a great house Gremory, I guess, The sister of one of our leaders, she said. Fortunately, she wasn't making fun of it. A house? Does that resemble a clan? I am the Yamanaka clan's leader. I suppose they mean the same thing, she said. Since my brother is one of the Satans, I will inherit House Gremory. The others were laughing in the kitchen, and although Rias was unsure, Ino smiled broadly once more and turned to the window with a faint smile. Apparently it used to like that, but it's not so busy anymore, Ino said. The majority of my work is ceremonial, the Hokage takes care of everything else. Someone stormed through the door and exclaimed, "Oh my god, how can anyone wear heels? Why did I wear them? I'm so exhausted." As if she owned the place, a pink-haired woman in a doctor's coat walked in, kicked off her heels, spread her coat across the couch and stretched. Sakura-chan. Rias was stunned because this was the first time he had ever used such a device. Naruto yelled as he emerged from the kitchen. "Well, you're looking pretty much the same," she smiled. "I also brought Sai, who is ascending the stairs. We haven't spoken much since our last encounter, so he must have gotten you right away." "Yeah, I don't think he barely said more than a sentence to me." "More than I got," she scowled. Before Ino broke the odd silence, there was a pause. "Go ahead." Naruto hadn't purchased any wine when they went to the store, but Ino wasn't positive, so she reached down into a paper bag and took a bottle. "I didn't think you'd come from how lame you are," she said. "Stop talking. This is our third time," she said with a smile, "and I could use it. I might grow accustomed to it." "Drinks?" Naruto uttered those words. "Hello, I'm Sakura. I heard Naruto here came with a guest," she said, rolling her eyes and saying, "Relax, it's just a glass," as her green eyes met Rias's. "Yes, my name is Rias Gremory," she grinned. "Well, if I know Naruto, he probably has a whole other batch of friends now." He's pretty well known, yes," they exchanged a glance. "That's Sai coming in," Sakura said, pressing her lips together as there was a commotion at the door. "What did he do this time, and why?" Naruto inquired. "He waddled through the entrance, his face popping through the mouth with a big smile," she said, and the door slammed open, bringing with it a large doll, or so she thought, which was squeezed through the door frame before turning toward them. "Naruto, it's good to see you again." They gazed at him. "What the devil? What's the reason behind your costume?" Naruto inquired. Isn't it obvious? I've read that all the greatest parties are the ones where you have to wear costumes." "This isn't a costume party, I guess that speaks for your party then." Naruto sighed, "This isn't even a party, get out of that costume, and stop reading those magazines, they barely help." "But I'm naked underneath." Rias couldn't help but join Ino in guffawing. Sai was forced to wear his own clothes after Naruto kicked him into the room. "We'll leave them be, for now," Sakura declared. Around the coffee table, they sat. Ino produced the bottle of wine and several glasses. They gave it to her without her asking. It wasn't a huge deal because her parents occasionally served her wine during dinner. "How do you know Uzumaki-kun?" was the simple question she chose to pose first. "We went to the academy, and were placed on the same team," they said, raising an eyebrow. "You met him, he brought you both here," Sakura said, biting her lip. Ino inquired, "How did he look?" "Well-traveled, he wore a poncho. He didn't say much." Sakura sighed and took a particularly large sip of her wine. "That sounds like him, he barely said anything to me either, not a, 'How have you been doing?' He just did what I asked," she said. Rias inquired, "Is he special to you?" She sighed in relief, barely suppressing it. She chuckled nervously, "You got that impression. I haven't seen him in more than a year, he's not well liked around here." Based on the silence, it's possible that she asked the incorrect question. "Uzumaki-kun and I met when he landed near me." Sakura answered, "Yeah, I almost forgot that you're from another dimension. I've had my fair share of them, that's more than enough." Here, too, it appeared to be typical. Maybe it was the glass, but she relaxed. Particularly when the conversation veered into clothing and other uninteresting subjects. Ino assisted at a flower shop when she wasn't working, and Sakura spent a lot of time at the hospital. They discussed a wide range of topics, including TV, fashion, and grievances. In particular, they discussed some of the fashions, differences, and similarities between their worlds. The other group then approached and engaged in conversation. When they started talking about memories, she felt a little excluded. She didn't think less of them. "Hey, remember when you told us you didn't write anything at all for the Chunin exam? How about that time when you tried to take a pay? Sai, we talked about this, I apologize for forgetting." After watching a comedy and a movie, they started to clear one by one, deciding to make another plan for tomorrow because many people couldn't make it at short notice. Lost in her nerves and fun, Rias gazed at the 3 empty bottles of wine on the coffee table, not sure how many glasses she had, 2 or 3, perhaps. Rias looked at Naruto, who was grinning, but something was bothering him. Well, that's not all of them, but it was good enough for me. Naruto sighed and sat at the end of the other couch. Rias wanted to talk, but it always made her nervous to bring up certain topics. They needed to improve. She fiddled with her hands and felt her belly warm. He turned on the television again and watched another show that she didn't pay any attention to. We should clear the air, he scratched his head and said, yeah, it's that you believe you love me. She scowled and said, I know so, I don't think so. He also sighed, you said you never experienced it, I haven't either, so there's no way to be certain. And you're positive you understand how I feel? Have you experienced love? She shot back. No, he sighed, and she smiled, triumphantly. I kinda want to find out, she said. With the taste of fruit on her lips, she pushed herself closer. Remember that discussion you had with my pawn? Issei? Eventually, they sort of blend together, especially since the majority of them are the same thing. Well, how about? Her query might be valid. He genuinely likes you. Learn about him. She scowled and changed the topic, saying, you're a devil now, would you ever think about having a harem? He chuckled, I already answered this, I think that's the stupidest thing ever. Really? She asked. She fell deeper in love. If he were hers, she would be hers alone. She edged closer, to the middle seat. Well, devils usually have. You know, devils are more self-centered and all that. I haven't noticed anything different, so I don't buy it. It's merely cultural. She hoped, really hoped. There were always thoughts of betrayal, and now she felt it come again. Besides, he replied, I'm not even sure to begin with that, I just want what my mom and dad had. With a sigh, she laid her head on the couch and gazed at him, occasionally catching a glimpse of his deep blue eyes. It's normal, even my father has one, she said. I genuinely desire what you desire. He wore a tight short sleeve, his arm appeared firm, and she drew nearer to him. You know, never thought I'd have a serious conversation about harems, he muttered, making the words so vulgar. She tucked in her legs and said, thank you, for taking her out to meet your friend, who had been thoughtful all day. He moved his weight in her direction. They'll get used to you, she said, smiling as she recalled how far he would go during training. Just like I have, I guess, she said. Rias was at her breaking point. She took hold of his arm, it was hot. He stared, but did not respond. Had he had any of the wine? She drew nearer, trembling, fearing that he would push her away and leave in a rage. It never happened. Are you going to stop me? She whispered, afraid that if she spoke, the spell would be broken, and all she could hear was the frantic drum of her heart in her ears. Rias leaned down, thinking it was a dream, but even as she brought her lips to his, it felt as real as their first kiss. She felt his hand trailing up her leg to rest on her thigh, and for a brief moment of bliss, he returned the kiss, but then he pulled away, nudging her away almost reluctantly. He didn't respond, and she felt bolder. You feel something for me, she said, her heart about to explode. You kissed me back, she said. You're imagining things, he said, his voice low and his features contorted. It was broken, whatever had happened. She stepped back, sensing his unease. Am I? She muttered. It feels good, but that's all to it, he said after a prolonged period of silence. I know you're a pretty girl, but that's about it, Rias. Instead of someone who would only use you to feel good, look for someone who would reciprocate your feelings. But I only want you, she said, and it was both painful and pleasant to hear. It only deepened her love for him. Something, anything, had to have happened. Did he use her at that moment? Tell me, why did you kiss me back? Are you telling the truth? Like I said earlier, I've thought of having something like that. Have you considered falling in love? He said, it wasn't of you, if that's what you're asking, as he fixed his jaw and looked straight ahead. Are you certain of that? I just know, then I just know what I feel about you. He obnoxiously and loudly cleared his throat, saying, anyway, I'll take the room unless you want to sleep on the couch because I'm exhausted. By the way, this did not occur. The door clicked shut in the hallway, and Rias was busy brushing her hair. He prepared for the day by restocking his ninja toolkit, gathering his kunai and shuriken, and arranging them on the coffee table. He sat down and examined their condition, determining that they were in good condition. Could you tell me about your dad? Unexpectedly, he turned back to putting his shuriken in his toolbox and asked, my dad. How about? Did he inspire you to take on the role of Hokage? I don't need that, he said, expecting her to apologize for nothing, but instead she had a frown and a pathetic expression. Not really, and to be honest I was an orphan, so I don't really know my parents, he said. You haven't met your mother, isn't that right? I frequently ask my mom for advice, she said, looking off into space and preoccupied. He smiled as he recalled her words that made him feel so warm. Rias, don't trouble yourself. He briefly lost himself in the memory of his mother, the one and only of a time too short. I had the opportunity to meet her once, and she expressed her desires for me. When she noticed his smile, she turned to face him and said, really? How did that occur? Think of it as, a part of her soul was temporarily left behind and sealed to help me, almost like Kurama, he said, not feeling the need to explain how chakra worked. He shrugged and chose to concentrate on finishing what he was doing, which was too early. The time told him it was a little early for the rendezvous, but he could handle that. She didn't respond, staring intently into nothing. Are you ready, Rias? Wearing a dark jacket over her red dress, Rias emerged from the room looking ready to go, so he had to catch up. He put on his jacket and gear, and most importantly, he put on his headband. You look pretty handsome, Rias said, keeping his gaze fixed on him the entire time. He was violently brought back to reality by the memory of her kiss. Oh, you too, I guess, in any case. How on earth was he thinking this? He didn't know what came over him, but he disregarded Tsunade's advice, which likely only gave her more confidence. It was the same question that had been circling around in his head for the past 2 days. He navigated his home's streets, which he knew like the back of his hand. Naruto recalled how she moaned and how he felt its hum on his lips, how it tickled and tingled, how her weight was on his lap, how her skin felt smooth and soft against his hand, how she stared with half-lidded eyes and husky whispers. If the alcohol came from a girl's mouth, he hoped his promise to his mother would still be upheld. It was just a taste, so it shouldn't be broken. He was thinking, what the devil? He glanced at her, her red hair catching his attention, her blue eyes gleaming in the sunlight, her lips curving into a bright smile. Heat shot up his face, and as he looked ahead, he could make out the Hokage building. Do we have a lot of work to do today? He could do this, provided she complied with his statements that evening, she inquired. Depends on what the Mizukage wants me to do, he said. He had to bring them to Earth, and then he was officially finished. He was informed of most things, but he was only required to carry out the Mizukage's instructions, which limited his ability to do much else because he had to be close to Rias. Mei was probably talking to Kakashi when they entered the courtyard outside the Hokage's building, and he was happy to arrive early because the other members of the mission had already arrived. Rias recognized a team member as they got closer, saying, "Oh, I didn't know you were on this meeting. I thought you were a doctor?" "Yeah, but I'm still a kunoichi and I can serve in the front lines, should I need to," Sakura said, smiling and waving at him in her casual attire that would be appropriate for any crowd on Earth. Since Rias was busy talking to Sakura, he went to the others and spoke with them. He recognized Tamari, Kuretsuchi, Darui, and technically himself as the other members of the Mizukage's retinue. He hadn't seen them in a long time, but he knew their names and they had fought together on the battlefield, so he wasn't too unfamiliar with them. The Mizukage soon joined them outside, and Kakashi bid them farewell. Now, all of you know of the potential outcomes, so it's expected that all of you look after one another should anything go wrong. Kakashi glanced over to Rias. We expect things to go smoothly with this devil faction. The others can be counted on. It was a study room, like the marbled checkered table, the different bookshelves in the library, and he had to force himself to pay attention. After the first meeting, almost everyone was dismissed, but the Mizukage wanted him by her side. Searzek's maid, whose name he couldn't remember but who remembered their last meeting, sat behind Mizukage, but remained silent as instructed, and Rias sat behind her brother. They had been here for 3 hours. It was tense at first, but it calmed down quickly. He did listen to Mei's mention of the war and the alliance, and they moved from the ordinary to exchanging opinions on politics, a topic, and their respective dimensions. He shifted his weight and tapped his fingers in a quiet rhythm, imagining for a moment that an attacker would burst through the windows, glass crashing against the floor, and he would move to support the Mizukage. He had to feel sorry for those who were at the receiving end of her lava. His eyes fluttered, their talking going distant. He would be awakened by a headshake or a pat on his cheeks. That was the first thing that I was genuinely looking forward to. Then, we shall continue our discussion tomorrow, Mei said. Are you planning on staying a night here on Earth or going back? Have we considered finding a place to stay, or was that assuming too much? If you would like, I can arrange for a hotel or room. We can give you sufficient protection if you remain on our land. If you choose to leave the territory, I am unable to provide that. Searzek appeared slightly irritated, but that soon vanished. I think we'll go with that second option. This is, as you say, a neutral ground, he said. They talked about what to do and what not to do for 20 more minutes after declaring that they were done, and then it was finally done. He knew who was coming when they left, and May's eyes flicked behind him before she turned down the halls, telling him to wait a moment while she gathered the other ninja. "Rias, you look bored," she said with a bright smile in return. "Is it really that clear?" "I hope not," he said, trying not to appear sleepy. "I don't think so, but I can read your moods pretty well. Today is bubbly, isn't it?" He suppressed a yawn, realizing that everyone in the small, mostly deserted library was either a ninja or a supernatural being. He saw that May had gathered the others and had spoken softly about their plans. "I think I know something that'll perk you up," Rias said, sweeping a few hairs over her ear. "Knock yourself out." Before he knew what had happened, she had leaned in and kissed him. He gasped as heat shot through his face, almost burning. He wanted to yell, but then he remembered his location and said, "Why'd you do that? Will we act as though that didn't also occur?" "I didn't want that," he said, turning away. "What didn't you want?" "It worked though, now you're only flustered," she said, glancing in the same direction as him, wondering what he might be looking at. In an attempt to cool his cheeks and slow his heartbeat, he cleared his throat as his lips tingled and he tasted her strawberry-flavored lip gloss. "Anyway," Rias continued, "it was more of a peck on the lips." "You're that good at reading me? That's a little unsettling, don't you think?" he said, crossing his arms. "It's only because we've lived together for so long, I had to learn when to avoid speaking to you." He frowned and said, Don't remind me," even though he should have known better. However, how could he handle this now? It seemed easier. "You're not like that anymore, you were homesick, among other things." As he put it, "Even after all I've said, you're still pretty stubborn, she ought to give up." "I don't want to give up, it's a small chance, but that's all I really need," she said as if she could read his thoughts. He couldn't help admiring what she said, and his mind went blank, so instead of answering, he wandered over to the Mizukage, who appeared to be finished talking anyway, and Rias followed him, drawing attention from the group. "Can I speak with my shinobi privately?" "Find a hotel, our host was gracious enough to provide for us," the Mizukage said to the others after May asked, and Rias nodded before leaving them alone. May asked how far he could go without Rias, and he replied that he couldn't go far without her. Sakura and the others left, dividing into a duo and heading to the lobby to follow her instructions. "A shame," she said. "However, right before we left the village, I did hear that they were ready for an attempt at removal after tomorrow." Really, he could almost taste the freedom. No longer would he have to worry about wandering too far and turning into some horrific beast. Tomorrow's is finally the day. A beautiful perspective, but even though I love to deliver good news, testing and real world implementation are very different. Consider it similar to honing a technique. He thought back to all the practice he had put into perfecting his Rasen Shuriken, which was undoubtedly time-consuming and useless until he mastered throwing it. He hoped for a one-time wonder. "Yeah, I get it," he said. "Did you gain any knowledge from the meeting? It makes me sleepy." "I guess that's what would happen if you're not participating," she laughed, "but anything else?" He had to sift through the minor details, saying, "You kinda mentioned the war and the alliance, and you weren't too friendly, but still a little aggressive, as if Kakashi had instructed him to do." "Good," she said with a gratified smile, "but ask yourself, why? You noticed a few things. I would go ahead, but this needs more privacy and can wait." Rias had asked if they could stop by the school, and he couldn't refuse her request, so he was free for the rest of the day and escorted the Mizukage toward a nearby hotel that the others found. As they passed through the school gate, Rias was carrying a stack of homework. It was amusing that he was still officially a student here. It was midday, lunchtime. So many students were out. She deposited her assignments outside, through the hallways, and close to the offices. "Look, they reunited once more. I believe they're in the same location. Is it just me, or does he seem content right now? Maybe she actually managed to melt his dead heart." Rias seemed to get excited by some of this gossip, and her step had a lively skip to it, but it was annoying to listen to as well. That is, until the meaner remarks came from his ugly reputation. "She's wasting her breath on an asshole like him. It's a shame that she's throwing her life away on him. I never thought that one of our great ladies could ever fall so low. You guys are actually so loud, I can't even hear myself think," Naruto said, putting an end to Rias's lowered shoulders and a smaller smile that fell short of her eyes. "Why don't you guys ask us questions if you truly want to know? Why was it necessary for everyone to assume the worst?" There was a lot of traffic because they were outside the cafeteria, and some of the students who were strewn all over the hall had the grace to look embarrassed, while others chose to act as though they were not listening. "Thank you," said Rias. "Why is something like this bothering you?" He sneered. Even though you're gorgeous, it's not something to be worshipped, man. With a look of surprise on her face, Rias turned to face him and grinned, asking, "Are you angry with me?" When he called them out, the students began to crowd around him, and Rias always seemed to think the best of him. If you don't even show people who you really are, how are they supposed to like you, Rias? We both know that the great lady deal is so incorrect that it's amusing. You're right, she said with a smile and grateful eyes. I enjoy reading manga and watching anime, she said. I love Japan. Nearly everything about this beautiful country is so wonderful to learn. I like to sleep naked because it's comfortable and I don't have to worry about the heat, she said, her confidence growing with each word. However, that final remark forced the image of her breasts spilling out from his blanket and the wide-eyed, slack-jawed reactions of the bystanders, some of whom were scandalized, made Rias' declarations hilarious. Everyone says he's an asshole, but I've seen who he truly is and I'm very much in love with Naruto Uzumaki, Rias continued, not yet finished. He was too preoccupied with laughing to notice what she had said, and then he felt the heat radiate up his body, setting him on fire. He felt so hot that it was absurd. What the hell? Saying things like that is not acceptable. Yes, I can, Rias said, standing on her toes to equal his height and leaning so close that he had to lean back. I won't pretend that we didn't share 3 kisses, for example. You claimed that the previous one was merely a peck. After realizing that everyone was watching their arguments, he heard the one voice that broke the dead silence and felt his heart pounding against his ears. This is my greatest betrayal, Issei said as she stood in the crowd, on the verge of crying. Oh, with his hands raised in the air, Naruto declared, I'm going. What the hell was he thinking? He couldn't even recall why he had done this in the first place, but he felt the big red flush on his face and stamped through the halls, and everyone let him pass on his warpath. He wished he could have left with his dignity. Before realizing that he couldn't continue without Rias, Naruto reached outside the gate, leaned against the wall, and crossed his arms. She needed to finish her task here. He spent a lot of time thinking about Meizurumi and her earlier statement because, on the plus side, it was a pleasant diversion. While Kakashi's advice was helpful, Mei's statement seemed more subtly stated. Why everything? Why did she say everything she did? Oh, you're still here? Naruto said as he heard Rias arrive. We both know it wasn't like I wanted to wait for you, he said, hearing the smile. Her body trembled with laughter as she snorted and covered her mouth with her hand to conceal her broad smile. What's so amusing? She finally stopped laughing as he scowled. I think I know what you are now, she replied. A tsundere. The horror. No matter what he said, there was no way to win this. The idea of attempting to ruin the pure joy she offered felt wrong. Damn it, let's just go get some fucking ice cream or something. With ice cream cones in hand, they strolled around the city. Since he didn't mention what she called him, Rias decided to stop making fun of him. Naruto appeared grumpy, but not nearly as angry as he had previously shown, and his frown as he licked his ice cream was positively adorable. Why ice cream? She inquired. I thought you liked it, he responded, and I wanted to go for a walk. To keep them informed, she wanted to visit her peerage, but after what transpired, she wanted to keep him away, merely because some of her peers, including her newest addition, had grown fond of him. He looked so happy in that moment, and her mind returned to how he had met his mother. It was fascinating and endearing how his mother had managed to leave a piece of her soul behind to help him, even if it was only temporarily. Naruto caught her by the wrist and pushed her behind him as they turned a corner. Who are you and why are you waiting for us? She caught a glimpse of a tall man leaning against the wall. Are the 2 of you married? The 2 of you are constantly stuck together. Are you married? Yeah, right, said Naruto. When the man mentioned it, everything seemed far away for a moment. Ironically, she had never imagined it because she had been taking things one step at a time. She forced herself to return to the conversation. Naruto went on to say, what does a fallen angel desire? Since it appears that angels never visit this place. He appeared innocuous for the time being, and she stood next to Naruto. The man had brown hair with blonde bangs, a dark vest, and a suit. He grinned broadly and said, I guess I'm not surprised. She is a young lady with good looks. Would she make a good addition to a harem? Particularly a devil like you and an heiress to a great house. Rias only glanced at him, anticipating his response, and she felt a smile twitch across her lips, while Naruto appeared irritated by her response. Why not let you guys handle it yourself? Harem this, harem that. A devil will always be second to me being a shinobi, he spat out, and she took pride in what he said. Perhaps, you're the type to save her, the man hummed, nodding wisely. You would be good pals with Issei, Yes, but I've met him before. Like me, a connoisseur, the man answered. Why had her pawn encountered this fallen angel? You mentioned shinobi. Is this what all the excitement is about? The man interrupted her thoughts. You don't know that guy, a valley, do you? I'm from the land of fire, a different dimension, Naruto retorted. The man smiled and said, my name is Azazel, with a curious gleam in his eye. Leader of the Grigori. Rias cut in. Why are you here? She scanned the streets, but it didn't appear to be in the area. Azazel raised his eyebrows. For your information, we do have an upcoming peace treaty. We do? I'm Naruto, and what do you want, since you were waiting around the corner for us, Naruto said, deciding to get right to the point. You. A few strange things about you, Naruto Uzumaki, were mentioned by our mutual friends. I don't believe you have a sacred piece of equipment unless it was made. Believe me, I am well informed about them. Naruto sighed. I barely know what those are, and it would be much easier to show you, as I'm from somewhere else other than hell and wherever those dragons hang out. He furrowed his forehead and bit his fingernails for a few seconds. Why not? The activities I engage in for research. Like that? Took us forever just to get a meeting with the devils, but I like you, Naruto retorted. I like myself too, only women can ever reach higher. After pausing, Naruto shrugged and said, whatever, Rias? She nodded, and Azazel strolled straight over, and a moment later they were in his apartment. It was an odd encounter, but she couldn't deny it, because apparently a peace treaty was in the works. Azazel wandered over, hands on his hips, gazing at the Hokage monument, which he had first seen through the windows of his apartment. Wonderful, he said, turning around, may I request that you show me that specific power within you? Sure. Naruto shrugged, and he shone brightly, lighting up the room with gold light. His cheek marks turned bold black, and he exuded power, a change she was still getting used to. That's great, but this one is really different from yours, isn't it? Azazel said with a single hand clap. Kurama, she whispered, recalling the dragon's bright face against Nine Tails. That's his name, Naruto said, and he returned to his normal self, with short blonde hair. He changed, but she felt as though he was no longer hers. His eyes became crimson, with slits as pupils and whiskers became more noticeable. Rias took a step back, feeling uneasy, and Naruto turned to face her. It was a voice that belonged to Kurama, and she thought it was from those times she should have avoided. This is her, huh? Really, just another human. Not sure what to say, it simply said, thank you for helping me, without bothering to reply, instead appearing unimpressed. My name is Azazel, Azazel said, grabbing Kurama's attention. It's a pleasure to meet you. Kurama retorted, you're acting like I'm going to remember that. Of course, said Azazel, laughing, but may I ask a question? You both appear to have a lot of power. How did you get there? Kurama complained, I don't understand, and I don't care, but appearing to comply nonetheless. I was created by the sage, Hagoromo. Naruto and I share the same power. Whatever is mine is his, or something like that. Interesting, Azazel said, his eyes glazed over as he pondered. She felt safe again, not that she was in danger, there was none, but Naruto's aura returned, and his eyes blued once more. Anyway, that's Kurama. Would you be able to meet the Hokage? He is my leader. Azazel remarked, it's definitely one way to thank you for entertaining my interest. It's also a smart thing, I suppose. Take the lead. It was a regular trip, and they followed Naruto outside, and she knew enough to know the location of the Hokage's building. In any case, what is sacred gear? Naruto inquired, and Azazel complied. Artifacts blessed by God himself, he bestowed them to humanity to perform miracles. A man who goes by that name, huh? It's not the first time, though. I believed you might have had a sacred piece of equipment, but I was mistaken. The possibility of souls being contained within them is not ruled out. You seem to know a lot about sacred gears, Rias said, interrupting him. Yes, I do, replied Azazel. I even created a few myself, but not quite like how God made them. Rias thought about it until they reached the Hokage's office. It was odd that she didn't experience that sharp pain when he mentioned God. Azazel appeared to have taken note as well, but that was just a fleeting thought as her mind considered sacred gears and souls being imparted sealed within them, such as Kurama and Naruto's mother. Hey, Azazel here says he's the leader of these fallen angels, so I brought him here to meet you, Rias said in response to Naruto's cry as the Hokage looked up, scanning the newcomers. A little unorthodox process to meet a foreign power, the Hokage said in response to Azazel's introduction. Fallen angels aren't quite like devils or the angels' factions. The Hokage turned to face them and said, or so people like to say, you two can go, and Naruto, Since you're here, check in with the fifth. Naruto grinned and said, yes, he appeared very eager. The following day, they repeated the same activities. Naruto bravely requested not to go back to school, and she gave him a suspicious look when he granted his wish. She was more than happy to comply, as her phone had been inundated with texts ever since she made her public statement yesterday. Despite her love for Akano, she didn't want to risk Naruto favoring Akano over her because her best friend was also her rival, and she had no control over whether Naruto checked his phone because he didn't appear to carry it with him. She had observed that Naruto was nervous during the day, that he was more thoughtful and less talkative, and that he appeared bored even during the meeting they were at, but that was no longer the case. When her brother in the Mizukage announced that the meeting was over and that they would be meeting again in Naruto's dimension, his eyes glowed with excitement. She returned them all in front of the office of the Hokage. Better than expected, Mei said, turning to face her retainers. First, we need to have a debriefing with the Hokage before you're all fired. You can go, Naruto, but not you. That lucky Suna. Someone interrupted themselves with a cough. Many thanks. She was essentially dragged through the village's streets and out of the tiny gates without Naruto even looking. Hey, why the rush? She inquired. We're going to find out if I get cured today, he smiled. Oh, she said. Sometimes she forgot that existed. She was constantly reminded to be without her whenever he wanted to go. I'm happy for you, she said. Well, we'll see, he said, ignoring her conflicted emotions as he looked straight ahead with his eyes fixed on a single goal. It was just the usual conversation, an expected part of her everyday life, but she wanted him to be happy, free, and able to follow his dreams despite her terrible fear that these would be their last moments together. Like living in the same apartment, having breakfast together every morning, and spending the entire day together, as well as the interesting and boring conversations they had. She had brought him back to life, and they had come a long way since then. Naruto used to frown all the time, but now she couldn't imagine him not smiling for a day. He used to look at her angrily, but now that he was no longer there, or had been, she wanted more than she had. Rias waited for the day he would kiss her just because he wanted to, and she could feel his lips on hers when they did. The feel of his hair in her hands had been so brief, and thinking about it now made her feel light. Would today be the end of it all? There you are? Tsunade, the fifth Hokage to speak, flinched, unaware that they were in a hospital because she had been so absorbed in her thoughts. A second doctor was standing behind her, taking notes. Looks like you're finished early, we've been ready since noon, Tsunade said, glancing at them both. Naruto answered, since this happened to me, I've been prepared. Easy, this is… Yeah, I know, it's like perfecting my technique. I'm glad you understand, Tsunade said, rolling her eyes. How about we get going now? Shizune has already been dispatched to gather everyone. You'll have to be inside with us, just as a precaution, Tsunade said as they were led to the third floor and she was taken into a room apart from Naruto. Will it be risky? Did Rias ask? I can't say for sure, but it's unlikely. Tsunade retorted, this time, we're not doing anything surgical. They'll be done with seals. I want you to remain in the corner and not move, speak, or do anything unless I specifically tell you to, okay? Of course, good, she said. Tsunade picked up a bundle of scrolls and examined each one. Isn't he hard to like? Yes, too stubborn for his own good, she said, apparently satisfied with her assessment. Now follow me, she said. A large, dark room with smooth flooring was shown to Rias, and a large number of people, all grouped together by their clothing or the symbols they carried, stood off to the side to assist him. Tsunade commanded, stand over there, and Rias did just that, standing by herself without Naruto even looking at her. In order to connect with the centerpiece, which she recalled they called seals, a number of ninjas stood opposite each other, a circle drawn beneath their feet, while Naruto stood shirtless in the middle of a large circular glyph of black symbols and writing on the floor that occupied the majority of the room. Each ninja received a scroll from Tsunade, which they then spread out in front of them. Tsunade gave silent commands, and they all obeyed. Tsunade stood on one of the empty circles, and everyone sat down and clasped their hands together. All right, let's get started. I want you to lie down in the middle, Naruto. There, a bit further to the right, is ideal. Is it necessary for the floor to be so cold? Did he ask? Take care of it. I want you to remain motionless now. Furthermore, avoid collecting or tampering with your chakra in any manner. Instead of responding, he did as she said, and Rias was so motionless that he didn't even notice his chest rising and falling with each breath. To the others, remember, weave your chakra like you're slowly pulling on a thread, gentle but firm. Nerves frayed, Rias swallowed hard, seeing black lines edging toward him, each one stopping at a specific line. They all yelled, Ready, one by one. On three, 1, 2, 3. A black circle converged on his chest where she had placed the night piece inside him, and each black line reached the center of his chest simultaneously, but Naruto seemed unconcerned. A few grunts from the sealers seated in the circle broke the long minutes of silence, and as their hands remained clasped together, sweat clung to their foreheads, but nothing disturbed their focus. One of them remarked, "I'm meeting some resistance. Tug a little harder, but not too much. There, I got it." Longer still, and the silence became too much for her to bear, so she crossed her arms and stared in silence, a tumultuous feeling that seemed to be going well until it didn't. All of the sealers gasped in shock as each black tendril snapped back to its original position, and Naruto seized, yelling as his muscles locked together. Rias took an automatic step, but she stopped herself when she noticed that it was similar to his past responses. The first to reply was Tsunade. "Naruto, are you alright?" He began to breathe deeply, almost hyperventilating, and said, "Yeah," in a strained voice. Just give me a moment, it'll pass," he said. She said, "If you're sure, what happened? Was there a problem?" The others remarked, "I did as you asked, fifth." The others in the room started muttering to themselves, but Tsunade's brought her team together and they talked about the sealing technique they used. They had done as instructed, no more or less, and nobody seemed to be at fault. She didn't care about them, she was only interested in Naruto. He stood with a furrowed brow and dim eyes, snatched up his coat, and made his way straight to the door. Instead of waiting for the Hokage, Rias pursued him. She wasn't sure if the remark was meant for her, but it didn't matter. She followed him through every room and hallway, and when he passed through the doors, she was right behind him. She could hear his footsteps echoing through the stairwell, even though he was usually very quiet, and she found him motionless through the roof-top door. She walked to him, but not too close, and after a while his hands stopped gripping the bar so tightly, he leaned against the railing, his arms stiff and taut, the setting sun shining brightly against her eyes, and he was only a silhouette. Willing to remain silent. "Yeah, I'm a little upset, but this is just the first one so far," he said, and she remained silent. "We'll try because they all said they would keep trying. It will eventually disappear along the way." "Are you going to remain silent, then?" She had thought about it a great deal. "I might not fully comprehend what love is. Maybe one day I'll lose the feelings I have for you, just as you let go of your rage for me. That's not today, tomorrow, or anytime soon, at least I know that." Guilt ridden, she sniffed, tears welling up in her eyes, but she held back. "I want to make a promise because it seems so straightforward and easy. I just want to let you know that everything is fine and that you are welcome to stay here because I want you to be happy. If I have to stay forever, I will." She felt her lips quiver and pressed them firmly together in an attempt to stop them. "What's causing your tears?" he asked, turning around so she could see those gentle blue eyes. She said, "I'm not crying," as a fat tear rolled down her cheek. He approached, put his hand on her cheek, and used his thumb to wipe the tear away. "Really? What is this? I'm so scared," she said, and everything began to pour out. "That once you're cured you'll never ever want to see me again, and even if that never happens, I'm afraid that one day I'll wake up and I won't be in love with you anymore." She nestled into his neck, feeling warm and safe, but she didn't deserve this. "That's silly, and I know you wouldn't lie," he said, feeling his arms encircling her, drawing her in and keeping her close. "I feel guilty, because I didn't want things to change even though I knew you'd be so happy. I'm so sorry," she said, sobbing and forcing herself to speak through the lump. She feared that he would discard her, but he remained silent and said, "It's okay, don't make that promise, instead." She sniffed and said, "It's too late, unmake it." "I did make a promise before, didn't I? It hardly feels like I'm making a vow," she repeated. "This is one way I can make you happy, which is what I want. How are your friends, family, and dreams? I doubt I'll ever be able to repay you that much." Although he had no family, she had met his friends. "You don't owe me anything, I don't expect anything. Everything I give is a gift," she said. He laughed and tightened his grip on her, saying, "Stupid. A little part of me doesn't believe you but." "Thank you," he said, stopping himself and taking her hands in his instead. She wanted nothing more than to be looked at with this warmth in her eyes, and now she knew with all her heart that she was in love with him. His eyes were so warm that she felt like crying again. "Well, you know what they say, fifth's time the charm. I think they only say that about the third. Whatever." Naruto waved his hand dismissively while smiling. He turned and proceeded down the street after that. Before she caught up to him, she observed him and took in the scenery. Rias waved back to those who greeted them, keeping pace. He remarked, "I think that was better today, we'll get through it." Now it had become a we. He was the one most impacted. but it made her heart skip a beat. It would be followed by another test in a few days. Then she said, "We're going to the Hokages, right?" She was aware of the path, but whenever it broke through the structures, the Hokage monument was the obvious indicator. "Of course, since your brother had a message for the Hokage." Rias gazed, his eyes genuine despite the steady barrage of attention. "What, something on my face?" he saw. Her cheek was pinched. "Just this," she said. "That's always a part of me," he said, pushing her hand through. Her response was, "I'm just thinking, that's all," he shrugged. Living together meant that they would always be silent. Her thoughts kept returning to him. Did he ever feel lonely as a child because he had no family? Her thoughts were focused on a potential fix for his issue. She had been thinking about it non-stop for the last few days. His training and their discussions together had developed into a potential solution. She only needed to speak with Azazel or someone who was familiar with the spell and the necessary information. The leader, preferably, appeared to have studied sacred gears. Fortunately, she was able to meet him. She hoped it would work. When they reached the Hokage's building, they crept inside. They heard a conversation outside the door, and she became alert when she recognized the voice. They were allowed inside after a brief knock. Azazel and Kakashi were conversing, engaging in some banal conversation about this village. Naruto said, "Yo, what are you doing here?" "Thought I'd stop by," Azazel said, turning to face them. He gave her a quick look. She didn't think this man would come here to meet her when she asked Issei if she wanted to. "A pleasure to speak to you again," says Kakashi, despite the freeform means. "Trust me, the Fallen aren't quite as organized as you might expect. Have a good day, and may I ask for some privacy as I speak to my shinobi?" Kakashi asked, glancing at the man. Azazel said, "Certainly, until next time," with a bow. She followed the man out of the room and down the corridor. What did the great Gremory heiress want to talk to me about, regardless of whether other people were listening in on their conversation? "You seem to be an expert. Has there been any instances of souls being split and contained, other than dragons?" she asked, not bothered by the epithet but eager to get right to the point. His eyes glowed with interest, but he made fun of her by saying, "Yes, I can remember a couple. Dragons have incredibly strong and resilient souls. Other supernatural souls aren't capable of handling the tasks that require the use of sacred gears, according to my testing. I just need it to be housed within someone. I don't need it to be kept in a sacred piece of equipment. Ideally, near a transfer, with both individuals unharmed." The man seemed to think out loud. "I suppose it's rather simple, a few modifications to the spell," and tapped his chin. "Could you please provide me with the spell's instructions? It's critical for my knight's health." "Ah, yes, your pawn mentioned that about him," Azazel hummed. Rias scowled. Was her pawn really that close to this odd man that he felt compelled to divulge such a thing so openly? "You had the option to ask your brother. A much safer choice, in my opinion. He would never approve of this, so please don't bring it up to him," Rias sighed. "I would owe you a huge debt, please. You would sacrifice your soul to save your knight because you love and care for him so much, for his happiness. How far would you go? And would you even persuade him to own a harem?" "You don't know him, but he's stubborn," she said politely to someone who might be able to assist her, but she scowled in irritation as she began to understand why Hyodo would get along with him. It was always about harems. With a laugh, Azazel said, "I'll comply with your request. Just let your knight know that I helped to heal his illness. It's fascinating, and in a way, this could be good for them." Unaware that she was holding a breath, she let it out. "Thank you," she said, calling her familiar, and they hurried off. She now had to wait, and she hoped it wouldn't be long. "Yes, that is essentially it. Searsex would like to move the appointment to next week." "That can be arranged. I'll compose a letter, and I'll drop it off at your apartment by tomorrow." Naruto smiled. "Excellent. Do you have anything else for me?" "There's not much else for you to do until you're cured," told Kakashi, leaning forward and folding his hands. Unfortunately, the cure was to be independent of Rias rather than to cure the devil side of things. "I kinda figured," Naruto said. "Keep up with the treatment," he said, of course, but he also noticed that many shinobi, especially his friends, were busy. Since they lived in two completely different worlds, how would a war affect them both? It made him think of the war. "Are you trying to get the other countries to join us?" "A good assessment," Kakashi replied. "Yes, it's good to be on a cautionary side of things, especially since they also prey on the non-supernatural." Good, he thought again, recalling May's words, which had always left a bitter aftertaste in his mouth. Did she say those things merely to gauge their reaction? "I want to leave you with one last piece of advice, Naruto." Kakashi's thoughts were interrupted by a smile that showed through his mask. What is that?" Enjoy your time while you're still young. I know you're eager to become Hokage. Being Hokage requires a lot of work. I still plan to be one for a long time, so don't be in such a rush. Like fall in love. Ever since Ria's confession, it seemed to be on his mind constantly. Yeah, he said, his thoughts drifting away. He was correct. He had years to learn all the ins and outs of being Hokage, so he didn't need to worry about it now. He could relax and make use of it, but he would be careful to remember it. Well, you already look better. I suppose I still have a few tricks to teach my pupil. Anyway, enjoy warming my seat. How ungrateful. He wished he had a mission because it would give him something to work toward. Otherwise, he could have spent the entire day with his friends, but it was incredibly dull. He let out a moan, I'm bored. As she looked up from her manga, he lay on his stomach with his chin resting on the armrest. She had brought out a lot from her room, and he had seen the large collection, but she claimed it was only a small part of her original collection. Her collection was insane. Where are your pals? They're all busy, he complained, adding that Sakura was constantly at the hospital and that everyone was sent off on missions to support the liaisons to other countries or other important things. You didn't receive another mission, did you? No, he answered, wanting to resume his mission. Focused routine. He had not made much progress in his training, which had mainly consisted of trying to control his devil power. We can go walk around, or maybe we can go back to Japan. For him, Japan it is, excellent, she dashed into the space. She was enjoying her time in his room while he was getting ready languidly. I should get a bigger place, she said. He went over to see why she was taking so long, and found that she was going through her suitcase, a drawer she had stolen from him, and stacks of books. The door was still open. You really turned my room more into yours, she said, displaying a number of her personal belongings and trinkets that she had purchased, including magazines, her manga books, a frame that used to hang in her apartment, and Bra's protruding hamper. You ran out of detergent, by the way, she said, putting one book inside the hamper and giving it to him to carry, without bothering to glance at him. Yeah, sure, I'll just carry all your junk for you. I'm grateful. In any case, Naruto held it while she prepared, and when they finally reached her apartment, it wasn't empty. Why in the world are you all here? Issei, Asia, and Akeno, three of Rias's peers, were sitting in the kitchen or the tiny living room, looking to the spot where they had teleported into her apartment. With her hand on her cheek, Akeno sat up and said, Ah, now there are the two lovers, is that what you two been doing? Have you been exclusively using him? He looked at Rias, her lips pressed together in a line, and Naruto said, You realize how strange this place is? At least in my world, I would understand if two women asked me to bear them children. Furthermore, harems are constantly mentioned. Oh, how charming. Whoever believed that Uzumaki-kun was homesick? Yeah, I'm secretly a huge softie, he shrugged. Issei followed Naruto as he marched down the hallway. Senpai, he said. Issei, he said, placing the hamper on top of the washing machine. Issei exclaimed in awe, Oh, is that? My friend, I'm going to stop you there. My own filthy laundry is inside. Oh gross. After he closed the slide and Rias and Akeno were discussing her confession, he went to his room because he didn't want to be mocked. What's up? How did you win the heart of one of the great ladies? Hell if I know, Naruto said, not intending to win her over, it just happened. Even she barely knows, he added. Fortunately, there was a second controller, so he handed it to Issei, who seemed happier than he had anticipated, and they started playing games on the TV. Oh. You have no idea how my friends and I felt when we discovered that Bucko had been sleeping in his undies. That's going to be a no from me, senpai. Could you tell me what kind of coin you saw and whether you were able to see her gorgeous breasts? Yeah, he said automatically as the image was brought up again. What do you mean by coin? Issei let out a deep gasp and said, Please, senpai, tell me how it looks. He shook off his pleading grip on his arm, saying, I thought you'd be upset. This is coming from the guy who said, This was my greatest betrayal, instead you're just your pervert self. Issei responded, Oh it's not your fault senpai, which Naruto felt was incorrect. Anyway, I embrace my pervert self. He scowled. Shamelessly, I might add, he said. Issei was an exceptionally skilled player. We all naturally love our breasts and asses, and maybe girls too, no matter what they want. This is who we are, and enjoying and appreciating the wonderful thing that is the female body is not something to feel guilty about. It was nearly too simple, but Naruto considered a method that would be extremely effective against Issei. They could have done more, but that wasn't what he was looking for, and what was he looking for? That was a lot of passion, Issei, and it would have been really inspiring if it weren't about boobs, he said. Unless you're a total creep about it, he said. Naruto recalled Rias on his lap. It's a lost cause because I also like girls. Then, as your fellow man, tell me about Rias' breasts. No, because I'm really selfish and I want to keep that to myself, he said without really giving it much thought. How dare you, Issei retorted, but I respect that. Why are you so good at this? Naruto asked after losing once more. I have excellent hand skills. In any case, did Bucko speak with that weird fallen angel boss? Rias desired to speak with Azazel. For what purpose? I don't know, it wasn't important, but it was strange. Naruto recalled that he had a phone, but he hadn't used it in a long time. It wasn't like he had many people to talk to, including Issei, Rias, and Akeno. He wondered where that cat girl and her dragon boss had disappeared to, along with Valley, he supposed, but he didn't have much chance to see them because he spent most of his time in his world. Issei left for the restroom, leaving him alone for the time being. It was not Issei or Rias who entered. How are you doing, Akeno? Bucko has you all to herself, it's not fair, she said, grinning as she stood against the closed door, running a hand through her long hair and her eyes glimmering with a familiar light. Oh, said Naruto, who remembered being envious of Ino and Sakura's appearance and their competitive edge from their childhood. That's why Rias didn't want me to come here, Naruto said. Akeno was a pretty girl, but he didn't know her well. That might change. He missed his home too, he simply felt more at ease there. I heard that you're a one-woman kind of guy, that's normal though. He looked at the screen, still paused in their match, not wanting to bring Rias to tears again, and she shook her head, moving closer, sitting next to him, her lips forming a smile. How would they feel on his lips? Rias would not be pleased at all. Speaking of the devil's love. With a letter in hand, Rias pushed the door open, her lips forming a tight line, her eyes widening in surprise, alternating between anger and hurt. I need to speak to my knight, she stated, leave, now. She followed his instructions and said, bye, to Rias as she walked past him, her eyes bright with laughter. So, what? Naruto decided to break the silence as Rias closed her eyes and took a deep breath while glaring daggers at the closed door. She interrupted, we're leaving too, and Rias approached him while still carrying the crumpled letter. Why? He stood with her, wondering what was so important, and scowled, we just got here. I'll explain when we get back home, she said. Home? He thought. There, we're here, now explain, he said as soon as he returned to his apartment. When Naruto turned to face her, he saw that she was unhappy, but he couldn't place it. Her features were still arranged in a frown, and she avoided looking at him. What? Are you upset? He asked. She bit her lip and avoided looking him in the eye, saying, I know you're not mine, and whoever you choose to spend your time with is not mine to judge. I'm mad at her, not you, she said. We didn't do anything, was the strangest feeling he had ever experienced, and he scratched his head, unsure of what to say. I made a promise after all, and you can choose to give your love to whoever you want, she said with a sigh before turning to face him. She had said, everything I give is a gift, which made him feel bad because she was sacrificing something for him. Rias had promised him too many things, all for his benefit. It didn't really bother him because, at least, they were sure they could cure him. You know, I never did say I would have liked to see you again. Once I did get better, he responded, recalling that they had mentioned it might be a long time before that happened. That means a lot, she whispered, glancing down at the letter. I've been waiting for this. Ever since you told me about your mother and Kurama, it has consumed all of my thoughts. I didn't anticipate hearing from him so soon. What are you talking about? He asked, furrowing his brow. The letter. Yes, I can make you better. What? How? He scowled, but she hadn't made a joke. When Rias said, I give you a piece of my soul, his mind went blank and he covered his chest with his hand. He recalled how Kurama had been torn from him and how he would have perished if the other half of Kurama hadn't been inside him. Speaking, Kurama said, it would work, clever. Isn't that dangerous? He inquired. Oh, no, not at all, she said with a phony smile. You're lying, I'm not, she said, flinching and blinking her eyes repeatedly. I can tell, he said, scowling and clenching his fists. Rias closed her eyes, and rage took hold once more. You know me so well, she said. Let me do this. Since I was the one who initially caused this, I am accountable for fixing it. You won't give your life for me, he said, gritting his teeth. If that were to happen, then I deserve to turn into a monster, which was difficult to think. No one, not even you, will get in the way of the promise I made to you, she said, her blue eyes turning defiant and steeling themselves into a composed resolve. I wish to honor my promise. You don't have to do this, we'll find a way eventually, Naruto said, flinching and turning his head away while crossing his arms. She whispered to him, "Give it a shot. If necessary, I'll even do it while you're sleeping." The only thing he could do, judging by the serious expression in her eye, was to ensure her safety while he was still conscious. "All right," he said. "What must we do?" "Lay down on the carpet," she said, smiling, her eyes wide with joy as she walked to the living room and pushed the coffee table out of the way. She knelt over him after he complied with her request. "Is that it? To aid me, we all had these elegant seals. It's supposed to be fast, since they sealed dragon souls on the spot," she said, leaning to the side and grabbing one of his kunai that had been on the table. "Sharper than I thought," Rias said, glancing at her hand and the kunai's edge above it as she dragged it across her palm and recoiled when it sliced through. Naruto heard his ears ring and his heart pounding out of his chest, but he couldn't bring himself to speak. All he could think about was Rias. He felt her power, a pulse, and she glowed red, like she was one fire. She gasped sharply as her blood-stained hand hovered over her chest, and he tried to get up, but one of her hands pressed him down. "It's fine," she said, saying a few words that he didn't hear, nothing more than a whisper. She whimpered in agony, her eyes were tightly closed, her lips quivered, and her hands were unsteady, but inside her hand was a dark orb that glowed and shimmered dark red, like blood that caught light. He believed it to be a part of her soul. It was cold and foreign, and he shivered as she held it over him and rotated her hand before descending and sending it straight through him. And Rias fell on top of him. Rias, the procedure was overlooked. She breathed heavily and blinked multiple times before it focused on him. "That hurt more than I thought," she said, panting. He sat up and rolled her over onto his lap. "Are you all right?" he asked, swallowing a lump. "How are you feeling?" "Just exhausted. More importantly, how do you feel?" he asked, holding Rias as she looked up at him, her eyes sunken and sweat clinging to her brow. With a nervous laugh, he said, "More crucial? I feel exactly the same." "Then try it. I know you want to. That can wait. Right now, I want you to be okay," said Naruto, shaking his head. "It's fine. Just put on the couch," she said, rolling her eyes. She inhaled deeply and shivered violently as he complied with her request. "Go. Try it. It'll only take a moment, right? Do it for me. I'd also like to know." "Don't close your eyes. This will only take a second," said Naruto, scowling. Rias was correct. All he needed to do was teleport far away. He closed his eyes and focused on the spot, deciding that Rias' apartment was the best seal to show up at. It was the sight of her empty apartment that made Naruto's eyes forcefully open. How long had it been since everyone had left? It didn't feel long at all. He expected it to arrive, but it didn't. If he took a step, would he feel it then? Another? 3. He laughed and felt a weight lifted off his shoulders, a paranoia he didn't realize he carried gone. No darkness, no corruption of his heart, no locking of his limbs. "She actually did it," he said. When he returned home, "All right." Naruto flinched at the interruption, but she managed to force a smile that this time extended to her eyes while she remained seated on the love seat, her chest visibly rising and falling. It was unreal. "Yeah," he whispered. "See?" she laughed. "I assured you that it would work." How could she have ever loved him for the way he treated her? What a silly girl, he thought. He felt tears welling up, and wiped them away before taking a breath. He moved a hand over his chest, where Rias had sealed a piece of her soul within him, all because of her love for him. Love made his parents sacrifice themselves for him. She had gazed, a silent observer. He created a clone, and it ran out of the building to obey the command. "For what purpose was that?" she inquired. "I'm fetching Sakura, to check you over and make sure you're all right." "Oh, what is wrong?" He turned his head away. "You didn't have to do that. I was going to get cured sooner or later, anyway." Rias said, "It was nothing, don't worry about it," with a feeble laugh. She said nothing, which was the response he had anticipated and knew she would give. He had asked it anyhow. He reached down and brushed a flyaway hair out of her face, but her skin burned against his hand, so she took his palm and placed it on her cheek. She whispered, "I love you," because of the way those eyes looked right into his. She was obstinate, vivacious, dramatic, and patient. How long would that last? He was quiet, still so unaccustomed to a declaration. "I feel a little silly now," he said, adding that it seems like I'm only saying I'm sorry because you helped me out. I apologize. I apologize for making everything difficult for you and for making you cry so many times." She responded right away, saying, "It's okay, I forgive you." Thanks to his father's method, his clone materialized. Sakura was with the clone, carrying a bag of supplies and wearing a doctor's uniform, her arms folded. She located him first and asked, "What's the emergency?" I want you to check up on Rias. After noticing her and humming when she was in this state, Sakura told him to move aside, went to sit next to Rias, and put her bag down. Now what did he do? Sakura inquired, and she produced a number of objects, some of which he was unfamiliar with, but one of which was a thermometer. Does he always get into trouble? Asked Rias with a smile. You won't believe how often, but he usually heals right back up without my help. He recognized the diagnostic technique when Sakura's hand turned green and she placed a hand over her heart to check on Rias. It's my doing, Rias said. I moved half of my blood? Really? Even though I don't know much, I do know that something like that can be deadly. Sakura answered, but I guess it's not a tailed beast. Rias gave him a quick glance before Sakura went on. I can see it, you put a lot of strain on your body, but, so far it's nothing serious. Sakura and Rias engaged in small talk, with Rias occasionally remarking on her well-being, while he sighed and leaned his head back, staring into the ceiling for a long time while he stirred his thoughts. Overall, I don't believe there is anything that should raise any red flags. I'll be doing it myself, so I'd like to set up a check-up for tomorrow night. Is there anything else? He cut me off. No, but rest is necessary for Rias. I would advise against moving around, using your power, or putting yourself through any other stressors anytime soon. Yeah, okay, thanks for the help, Sakura answered. It's my responsibility to assist the injured, of course. Now, will you take me back to the hospital? It's incredibly helpful. A moment later, he was back at her side. Rias yawned and looked too exhausted to speak, so he put the TV on background noise, got her a blanket and covered her, made her tea and set the cup on the coffee table, and she thanked him for everything. He wasn't thinking about much else because he was so preoccupied. She had fallen asleep while he was cooking, and it took some effort on his part to wake her up, but she had to eat, so he ate a couple of bowls of the plain soup and she fed herself. Naruto made soup for supper, and he wished it tasted great, but it was nothing special. She sighed, that was good, and yawned. Are you going to be okay by yourself? I'll be back by tomorrow afternoon, he said abruptly, unable to wait any longer and in need of someone to talk to in order to get these thoughts out of his head. Where are you heading? She inquired. I must speak with a significant other. A clone can be left by me. With her eyes closing a few times, she shook her head and said, No, it's fine, I might sleep until you come back. Want to spend the night in the room? He asked, and she hummed even though her eyes were closed. He picked her up and held her tenderly, and she nestled in his neck as he carried her into his room and set her down. Whispering, I'll be waiting for you, she said. Yeah, if you need anything, you can always use that seal and I'll be there right away. There was still plenty of time before sundown, so Naruto gathered his energy and went motionless before closing his eyes and teleporting himself somewhere in a forest outside the village. The other half of the OID sage's chakra sensed him somewhere, far out in the wilderness, past the land of stone. He was farther away than he had anticipated, but if he made a straight beeline at full speed, he should return to Rias by morning. There was no time to waste, and he would even be using his father's method to expedite things. As he ran through forests and swamps, through dense forests and great lakes, across plains and chasms in the dark, and finally into mountain ranges that stretched as far as he could see, his thoughts were dense and hazy, focused on Rias Gremory and the possibility of becoming a devil. He discovered him in the early morning light, sitting by a flowing river with a smoldering fire close by and a sword resting on the fallen log next to him. Expectantly, Sasuke looked up as the Rinnegan gazed at him from behind a curtain of hair. What's so important that you had to seek me out? It had been so long since those days of Team 7, and now they were each figuring out their own paths. Naruto found a big rock and brought it closer to the fire. He could see the gray plumes of smoke from a village farther down the valley, where buildings protruded from the forest. He didn't miss the restriction, but Naruto's presence was an expectation, and he felt liberated as he looked over his shoulder, expecting Rias to be standing a considerable distance away. I wanted to talk. Sasuke pulled out a big flask and threw it. After all the running and in the weather, he caught and discovered hot tea inside. I'm not even sure where to start, he sighed, his breath visible. The beginning is as good as any, he shrugged and said, well, I guess it all started when I was training. He covered everything, including everything he knew about being a devil, Rias, and all the trouble he had gotten into and everything he had learned since arriving. I see, Sasuke said. I wouldn't have asked if I had known it was that long. Naruto chuckled. It feels short as I think about it, but it felt so long at the time. They were silent for a long moment until Sasuke broke the silence, and Naruto looked behind him once more but found nothing. So, what's bothering you is the longevity of being a devil, he said. How long has it been? Of course he would hit it right so quickly, because that was him after all, his brother and closest friend. we had a fight 2 years ago? Naruto threw back the flask, and he looked at his bandaged arm. Around there, yeah, he said. You succeeded in dissuading me from going down that route, though it took some persuasion. I made the decision to live a long life alone. But yours isn't voluntarily. Though he wasn't concerned, he grinned because his dreams and wishes were now secure. How would you have done it? Scowled Naruto. Having few or no friends makes things easier, but your bonds are everything to you. It'll be strange when they all grow older, said Naruto. Dying to old age and all that. You expect me to let you go on ahead? Sighed Sasuke. With wide eyes, Naruto said, what? Not that I'll turn a devil myself. I told you before, there are a lot of options for a long life. Would you do that? You might as well be my brother in all but blood, but you're also my rival, he said, looking at Naruto. I'll assist you even though my current perspective on this world is more positive. Naturally, I would also probably believe that your approach to achieving peace is ineffective. Naruto chuckled. Observe yourself. You have to constantly ruin a good moment by being foolish. Moron, I'm being realistic, sneered Sasuke. Thank though, he said, considering that he didn't have to watch one person wither away over time. He assumed that until the time came, he wouldn't have much to worry about. If his friends lived long lives, that was good because at least they wouldn't have perished in battle. That was one thing he could do to ensure that their children's fates were the same. To live long lives free from conflict. Murmuring, I wonder what the future holds for us, Naruto pictured himself as Hokage, with children, and in perpetual peace. Having spent centuries with you? An incessant headache? That dragon I mentioned was one of the tough guys over there, he said with a smile. Who knows how powerful it is in reality? It's not us that needs to be prepared for it. Yes, absolutely, he chuckled, and Sasuke grinned slightly. He'll get by with his long life. Love came to mind when he thought of home. For love, Rias had vowed to give up everything she knew in order to make him happy and allow him to achieve his aspirations. If he had to be honest, it was difficult to answer. What did it mean that he wasn't in love with her? Did he feel guilty because he couldn't reciprocate those feelings? What about for him? If he had been in Rias' shoes, would he have acted similarly? With a sigh, Naruto considered a response. I'll see you whenever you come around, Sasuke. He put his jacket on the coat hanger and took off his sandals as she watched him move around the living room. Welcome home, she said, remembering how he had taken care of her the night before. With a yawn, he glanced up and said, Did I wake you, Rias? No, I was awake for a while now. His eyes were warm and worried. How are you feeling? I've been sleeping in bed, I'm still exhausted, she said, drawing nearer and choosing to make fun of him. Celebrating the return of your freedom? He laughed. In a way, I've been running all night, I could use some rest. Why? She gasped as Naruto said, I forgive you, looking to the ground. I haven't really thought about it, and I kind of forgot, she said. Although you were somewhat self-centered, I appreciate that you tried to act in accordance with your moral convictions. It's the thought that matters, so I can't really hold you responsible for that. What? I thought you'd be happy, he said. No, I kinda knew it. You knew something? It's the way you look at me, said Rias with a smile. His neck was rubbed. Oh, he said. To be honest, I'm a little confused. How about? I don't love you, I'm pretty sure of that, but I don't really have much to go on, she said, not realizing how soft his blue eyes could appear. Naturally, he had stated on several occasions that he was unable to give her back what she had requested, but why was he bringing this up? What are you saying? I want to find out if I can, he said, turning his head away as his cheeks flushed. Her heart seemed to stop. Really? She choked out, unsure of what to say because this was so unbelievable. While continuing to stare, he rubbed his neck once more and said, I know it's been rough through. She started crying as he said all of these things. He pulled her hand and embraced her, saying, Damn, and she heard his smile. I thought it all was over, of me making you cry, he said. She really tried to stop. She cried and laughed. He leaned back, and she turned to face him. He wiped away her tears with both hands on her cheeks. She sniffed, and then she said, This is completely different though, these are tears of happiness, in a heavy voice. A grin, that's good, I don't feel like a total jerk now. Well, once upon a time, you were a big one, Rias chuckled. He answered, I know, I'm sorry, can you forgive me? Did I not already do that? She could actually feel him, the firmness of his muscles, the warmth of his skin, and he gazed with regret in his eyes. He uttered the words, I want to hear it again, quietly. I forgive you. What gives you the impression that I'm not always like that? He asked, shaking his head. I didn't treat you nicely. I am aware that you are not really that way. Your easy laughs and smiles fit you better than any frown. Warmth gathered in Naruto's eyes as he stared in silence. What are you looking for? She put her arms around his neck and stroked his back as he drew her closer, his cheek caresses gentle and personal. I know I'm being greedy, but I want so much, she responded. That's just being a devil. His warm hands landed on her waist and he pulled her tighter. That's bull, he said, looking at her with a twinkle in his eyes as he ran a hand through her hair and played with a strand. She laughed and said, okay, that's just me. Rias felt comfortable discussing her desires, both simple and complex, new and old. I want you, she said. With you, I want to be happy. You're the only person who truly loves me. Even though his cheek was slightly flushed, he continued to look into her eyes with longing. Well, I guess I had it coming with that question, he said. I'm not finished yet, are you joking with me? She was overjoyed and grinned so broadly that it hurt. She went on, and Naruto's face reddened with every word she spoke. I want us to be together, forever. I hope to marry you someday and welcome you home whenever you can. To express my love for you every single day. You won't ever have to be by yourself again. She wanted to say one last thing, but she refrained from doing so. Naruto turned away, looking sheepish, and said, Did I mention that you were really too much? Once or twice, he shook his head and laughed, saying, You know, that's a lot of pressure. However, I suppose you are aware of what you want. Is that really that bad? She posed a playful question. His face was flushed, agitated and ashamed, and his eyes were closed. You know, just because you said those things doesn't mean my response will change immediately. Yes, I know, Rias said, laughing, though she couldn't quite recall when she had laughed so much. I'm willing to wait if necessary. Naruto never had any parents or anyone to teach him how to be loved, so she spent the time he was silent admiring him. His blonde hair, his features, their intimacy, while he played with a strand of her hair. After calming down, the redness subsided, and his blue eyes became determined. His eyes finally fluttered open. I can at least make one promise, he said. I'm able to handle this gradually. Oh, please, don't laugh, I'm not kidding. She looked at him longingly and sighed. No, it's just, that's what I've been doing this entire time, she said. She twirled a strand of his hair and traced his jawline with her hand up to his face, not quite sure what to do next. Silent and lost in thought, Naruto said, I was never much for thinking, and then he leaned in to give her a quick, chaste kiss that ended too soon. He looked at her response, and she felt her heart leap. It wasn't the kiss, but everything about it. His soft words, his slow, contemplative, intimate touch, and the way he looked at her, was genuine. Oh, you won't cry like that every time, will you? Her eyes had been filled with tears. I don't think so, but that's the one thing I really wanted, she said. You didn't mention that, he scowled. I didn't want to pressure you. Really? You didn't want to put any pressure on me about that one thing? She chuckled and gave him a quick, tender kiss, just like he had. Are you withholding anything else from me? I want to spend the rest of the day with you, she said, humming as she considered what else she wanted. Rias leaned on his shoulder and held him close. That's not much different than usual, she said. I know, and as she looked into his eyes, she realized how much she loved him and how he was all hers. What lies ahead for us? I'm wondering about that too, he smiled. It would be all right as long as she had him. How much she cherished this man. There were no words to express how his skin felt to the touch, how delightfully hot it was, how she longed for his intimacy, and how he called her name. He was rougher, faster, and she felt every movement. It was almost difficult to breathe. It was too much. His weight on her back was a blessing. She felt the heat and the sweat that dropped from her brow. He kissed the back of her neck. She saw stars, and her mind went blank and she felt bliss. Her grip tightened around the sheets. She heard his deep breaths, felt them flow down her neck that sent pleasant shivers down her spine. She was in the same state, her legs shaking, her heart racing, and she heard Naruto collapse on top of her. They lay there for a long time until they regained their bearings, and she reached for the nightstand to clean herself. You were loud, he uttered, panting. Was I? I was completely unaware of it. Naruto moved his weight, drew her in, and ran his hand over her abdomen. Every time he said, I love you, her heart fluttered. I love you too, she answered. It was a good thing that she discovered she liked this, but it was a bad thing that he never said it so frequently. Nevertheless, he always said it whenever they got together like this. As fatigue set in, Rias noticed her eyes fluttering. Can we remain in bed? She observed that she became tired more easily, which was a consequence of her soul transfer. Sakura had confirmed that the problems were not serious, but that she recovered more slowly and that the fatigue was easy. Okay, he said, humming as he found her hand and clasped it with his own. For times like these, it was all worthwhile. She woke up alone, the alarm clock showing late afternoon, and she fluttered in and out of consciousness, usually because of him or because she was trying to find a more comfortable spot. She didn't wake up until she was compelled to get out of bed by natural urges. From the kitchen came the sound and smell of cooking, and she discovered one of his shirts, easier to put on and more comfortable. He saw her, his eyes following her up, and she walked out to meet him. Nearly everything was packed up and ready to go, or stored in boxes. She approached him and planted a kiss on his lips. "Staying in bed all day isn't possible," he answered. "Then we'll just go back to it," she said as she went to the restroom. "I was supposed to move out today." When she was finished, she discovered that he had finished preparing a simple meal consisting of potatoes and eggs, and she could feel her stomach rumbling. "Bed or couch?" "Couch." He entered the living room, which was empty save for the couch and television, and he sat down while she cuddled up to him. He switched on the television, but she ignored it, and although she was still drowsy, her hunger overcame her. She occasionally received food, but she always picked up the hash browns by hand. "Damn, did we not eat all day?" Naruto answered, "You're the one who wanted to stay in bed." She hummed, "It's not every day that we get a full day to ourselves," and as she bit into the food, she reflected on this morning. "Do you recall our first time?" Frowning, he said, "Please no." "What?" She laughed, "It was beautiful. Neither of us really knew what we were doing until recently." He averted his gaze. "It wasn't, please don't." "What, please?" She made fun of it. "Don't make me relive it." "Fine, but I still think it was lovely," she said, smiling but still giving in. Even though Rias was full at the time, there was still food on the plate, so she waited for him to finish by resting her eyes and snuggling up to his warmth. "Go back to sleep." He carried her back to the safety of his room, which was bare and had lost all its character in their attempt to move out. "Yeah," she said. Still remembering all those times she didn't miss, she threw off his shirt and cuddled up to him, falling asleep with him in her arms after being let down. It was all about Rias in his dream. "Fuck," he swore. He was lying in the rubble near the side of a building several stories high when she stumbled upon him. She had to fly up. He held his blood-stained stomach and grunted as he pressed on the soggy, wet clothes, which covered his hands in red. Took everything. As she knelt next to him, he caught her attention. His blue eyes faltered, but he maintained them. She sensed the power within. No normal person could survive being flung through a few buildings. Fortunately, no one seemed injured. "I am Rias Gramori," she said, "and you're going to die. If I make you a devil, I can help you and you can live." Breathlessly, he said, "No, too much to do. I don't need it, just give me a." When his eyes closed, she sensed something else, a spark. That came from within but wasn't him. This young man had some sort of magical talent, and he would come to enjoy being a devil, which had many advantages over being purely mortal. She had to decide whether to turn him or leave him dead, and she didn't have much time to think about it. She recalled what had happened in her apartment. He stood up straight, his eyes flashing with rage. "What did you do?" he snarled. "I saved your life. What on earth is meant by a devil?" She responded to his query, but he reacted angrily when she claimed that it had extended his life by centuries. "That wasn't necessary. I'm outta here," he said, "whoever you are." "Wah, wait," she yelled, but he was already focused on the window, so he opened it and leapt out, unfazed by the height, and started moving quickly. Whoever this boy was, he was certainly no normal human, and for the moment he appeared distraught, so she needed to send her familiar. Was she going to lose a night piece like that? No, she wouldn't let that happen. She let out a scream as something exploded through the wall, glowed dimly but vanished too fast for her to catch it, and she prepared her power only to find her new knight in the wreckage. He held a hand to his head and writhed on the floor, moaning. "Hey, are you all right?" She approached him and knelt down, and it took him a few moments to return to normal. A red eye, which had been blue just a moment before, stared into her as he breathed heavily. "What the fuck did you do to me?" She experienced enough power to cause the building to tremble. "I don't know, that's not supposed to happen." "Make me better," he insisted on. All she could think about was that he was powerful and knew how to use it. "In time, you'll feel better once your body gets accustomed to it," she said, blinking. "It better," he said, sitting up with doubtful eyes. Someone began hammering on the door, but she didn't even know his name. She hadn't had a chance to read it yet, but Rias woke up in his arms as his hands turned a page in his favorite book, the one that gave him his name. She turned and glanced up at him, who had an inquisitive sparkle in his eyes. "Kiss me," she uttered. It was always so tender, so different from the passionate kisses she gave him, and she still loved it. He smiled and complied with her request. "Are you still tired?" he inquired. you did keep me up all night. You make it sound so dirty. Not all night long, she laughed. I did have fun with your friends though, she said. Sorry we were out so late. No, it was fun. Will you be able to sleep tonight? He asked, rolling his eyes. I can think of a few things to get me tired, she said, her eyes glazed. Go back to sleep, he said, laughing and shaking his head. She whispered, I like this lazy day, but her dreams were erratic and not exactly what she remembered. What made you assault those pupils? She scowled and turned to Akano for help after he ignored her, put on his headphones, and turned up the music. With amused eyes, Akano chuckled and said, Uzumaki, why did you beat up those poor boys? It's not that I didn't like it. Because I treat poor little Rias so badly, apparently, Naruto said, turning to face Akano. Although he called everyone by their first names, she occasionally didn't know what to make of the fact that she called her by name, as though they were so familiar. Oh, is that it? I completed what they had begun. What if they were actually acquainted with Rias? Or when she attempted to persuade him to perform any duties assigned by the devil. I'm not doing any of those contracts, or getting a familiar. He was being resistant, so she scowled. Why not? What am I going to do with them? I'm not interested in advancing in the devil's ranks or in something I'm unlikely to use. It's a prop. It doesn't matter, I'm not going, he said, waving his hand. Delaying another visit. Why was he forced to hide his identity? He wasn't that person. This would be a great chance. She tapped his shoulder and he turned when she discovered him in a music store, listening to a song. He appeared far away, nodding his head rhythmically to the music. Yes, do you want that? He said, well if you're offering, with a raised eyebrow. The night before Riser's arrival was the subject of her dream. She recalled a glimpse of his strength when he first appeared, and anything would be helpful. Naturally, she considered solutions, a last-ditch effort to break her arrangement, but she was stuck here. It ended when she realized that her knight had to be by her side at all times, and that seducing him was probably impossible as well. Graphia had arrived when she was at a loss for ideas. With a sigh, she had to persuade Naruto to accompany her. The clock struck midnight, and when Rias woke up again, it was dark outside. Naruto was snoring softly, and she had come closer after drifting farther away during the night. They weren't pleasant dreams, but she wouldn't call them nightmares. At times, Rias didn't believe that they were here now, after everything had been so tense in the beginning. She admired him for his short blonde hair, those marks, and his slender figure. They hadn't done anything special that day, she hadn't made any big promises, and he hadn't hinted at them. They had just been sitting on his couch, talking about the ordinary aspects of their day, when he turned to her and said, I love you. The memory of the first time he had said that to her flashed through her mind. She whispered, Naruto, and he stirred. Naruto. Is there something wrong, Rias? His eyes seemed to glow in the moonlight, and he spoke in a thick, husky voice that made her shudder. She got up and straddled him, saying, something like that, I can't sleep. You want me to cater to all of your needs? He moaned. Something like that, she said with a smile. Sometime in the morning, Rias woke up to the sound of footsteps and shuffling outside the room. She lay there for a long time before deciding to get up, yawning loudly enough to attract his attention. I actually have to move out today, so I'm not staying in bed, Naruto said, sticking his head inside. Will you assist or not? I have to get ready first. Guess that's a no. I have to get my stuff too, and I'm not as helpful as dozens of you, she said, sticking her tongue out at him. She gathered her clothes and went into the bathroom. When she emerged, the kitchen was almost empty, but there was some cold food on the counter that she ate. Clones moved into the background, carrying boxes of belongings. He shrugged and left. I'll see you, she said as she dried her hair and prepared for the day while he was occupied in the living room and she grabbed her shoes. He raised his head and said, yes, when I'm done moving all this junk, I'll be there. She channeled her teleportation and appeared in her old apartment, which had been abandoned for a while since she slept at Naruto's, though he wasn't there frequently because he had missions to finish. A red seal appeared underneath her. These days, it was particularly obvious that her boyfriend was a ninja. Her phone rang multiple times, and when she reconnected, some old texts came to life. The most recent one was from Akano, asking to speak with her. She responded that she would be in her apartment for the next hour or so. The other texts weren't as urgent, so she concentrated on packing away her belongings. The majority of her belongings were already in boxes, and the remainder could be donated. She collected the remaining items and put them in the kitchen. The electronics were frequently incompatible. It was like traveling to a foreign country. They had previously been forced to live together, but now they chose to do so. It wasn't a tough choice because they were accustomed to it. Rias had been busy stocking the last couple of boxes of her belongings when Akeno arrived, so she used her spare key to unlock the door. "Bucko," she said. Having forgotten her chore, Rias grinned and went to embrace her, saying, "Hey, how has this weekend been going for my queen?" Rias went back to packing in another box at the table. Despite the sadness in his smile, Akeno said, My, haven't you noticed how you look? What does that mean to you? Is something wrong?" She appeared fine when she left Naruto's, but her clothes concealed her soreness. Sighing, Akeno said, "I guess you haven't. I'm jealous. You appear to be in complete bliss. Your joy is radiant." "I am," Rias admitted as her hands froze and she turned to face her best friend. Her heart skipped a beat when she thought of Naruto. "Does love look like that?" she asked, her eyes downcast. "What is the sensation?" "I guess," said Rias. "Was it really that clear? It's difficult to explain. I feel like I'm about to explode when we're together and he looks at me. I feel weightless whenever he smiles at me. I want what you have. I want to feel the way you do," Akeno said quickly, her eyes watering, her arms crossed, her brows furrowed, and her lips pressed together. "I desire him." Emotions rushing through her, Rias gasped and unwrapped her hand around a small box, wanting to say that Naruto was hers alone, but that thought vanished in an instant. Rias recalled all the times Naruto spent with other girls, including the brief moments he shared with Akeno, when they would whisper in each other's ear and make them laugh. Other girls would sometimes take advantage of her when she was preoccupied with something, and those random women who would approach him on the street would occasionally put their arm around his. His friends were a different story. She would try to get his attention, and it would work for a while before he returned to them. Poor jealously. Those random women were easier. She would approach and take his hands, and she would feel a rush of triumph when they walked off together. Every time he spent time with another woman, Azazel's words reverberated in her mind. Would you go so far as to persuade him to own a harem in order to ensure his happiness? "Bucko," said Akeno. Sorry, I was thinking," said Rias, flinching as she was shaken from the depths of her thoughts. The happiness of Naruto was the most important thing to Rias, and she wanted her queen to be happy, and she knew Akeno, after all, she was her best friend. Rias said, "Maybe, he'll want you too, even though it was painful." "Really?" Akeno's eyes widened. "Yes. He's a devil after all, harems are normal," Rias said, forcing a smile. "I did manage to make him fall for me after all," she said. "That's true, and he initially kind of hated you, didn't he?" Akeno grinned and laughed. "The journey wasn't easy. I can speak to him about it too." "Would you do that?" Akeno inquired. Her eyes then widened in surprise. Behind her, Rias sensed a presence. "Boo," said Naruto. Rias screamed and jumped. She yelled, "Stop doing that," and struck his chest. They weren't alone, he realized as he laughed. "Oh, hey Akeno," she said. "Hello, Naruto," with a smile. Naruto remained beside her. "How have you been?" "It's been a while, sorry about that, I've been busy with missions, I do have to make a living too." "That's okay, I'm doing better now, I've missed you." As Rias listened to their casual conversation, she became aware that she was staring and distracted herself by packing. "I missed you too, is that perv around here?" Naruto smiled. Laughing, Akeno said, "No, he isn't. Well, I'm excited for when you guys can visit my home." He could be shared by Rias. She would eventually move past it. "I'm excited for it, Rias?" asked Naruto. She gazed up into his curious eyes. "You ready? Are these all your stuff you're bringing?" "Oh, yes. That's everything so far," he said as he pointed to a collection of items arranged around the table. Naruto answered, "Cool, should we get going then?" He picked up all the boxes and created clones. "I'll see you later, Akeno," she said, having nothing left to carry. "Oh, okay," she said, blinking. Rias nodded in response to Naruto's question. "You remember where it was, right?" The seal materialized beneath them, and Akeno waved goodbye. The clones entered the house after they emerged from outside. She was in awe of the modest two-story house that would become her home. Naruto took her hand and ushered her inside, saying, "Come on." He had a lot of busy clones who carried boxes up the stairs or through the hallways or moved furniture. They entered the living room after removing their shoes. "Is something the matter?" Rias scowled. She wanted to put it out of her mind for one last day. He waited for her to continue, tilting his head. "I've just been thinking," he said. Playing with a lock of her hair between his fingers, he drew her closer. When she did that, she became sidetracked and returned to her work. "I've been thinking about all the ways I could make you happy," she said, turning her head away. "Have you?" hummed Naruto. Rias replied, that's why, I'll be fine with it, should you want a harem. His face was etched with shock as his eyes widened. Then he burst out laughing. The more Rias laughed, the redder he became. WH. What? That's the stupidest thing I ever heard you say, he said, laughing even harder and holding his stomach as tears streamed from his eyes. Rias asked, are you going to explain yourself? As she crossed her arms and felt the awful flush all over. He gave her a last glance before he managed to chuckle one last time. Is this what you were worried about, Rias? Just because any girl is my friend, doesn't mean I want them, or that I love them like you. I love my friends, yes, and I die for them. It's like you said, that applies to me too. I want nobody to love me like you. I was trying not to be selfish, I wanted to make you as happy as possible, she sobbed, feeling foolish. After shaking his head, he lifted her and grasped her knees. I want you to be selfish. Geez, how many times have I talked shit about harems? He said, kissing her cheeks and lips multiple times. She played with her hands and sniffed, saying, I guess I was waiting for it every time. She was carried to the couch by Naruto. He sighed as he sat down and gave her such a deep look that she flushed once more. I thought a lot about love, maybe I thought too much, or maybe too little, but I think I can describe it. She inquired, what is it? He gave her another kiss. Love is simply wanting to make each other happy, and I want to make you happy, more than anyone I've ever met in both our worlds. You, before anyone else. It was hard to believe that he could be so romantic, and it made her heart race. Although she agreed with it, the description seemed a bit too straightforward. She wanted more kisses because she felt hot at the time. I want that for you too, she said in a low voice. Good, he said with a smile. Now get off me, I got to go to the washroom. The romance had vanished. Idiot, she muttered as she followed his instructions. As he walked away, she crossed her arms and gave him a scowl. What? Rias glanced around. It already had a cozy feel. Grocery bags were in the kitchen, and a clone was filling the refrigerator. She chose to have another look even though she had been here before. She noticed that there were clones everywhere in her new house. For the simple reason that it was a much larger space, many parts felt empty. She discovered the boxes that were hers in one spacious room, overflowing with her manga and other Japanese items. There were only a few small shelves, but they could get more, so she leaned in the doorway. Rias imagined it. Bookshelves filled with books that extended to the ceiling. A small couch to read on, maybe. She then conjured up additional images, including toys, a tiny crib in the corner, and red or orange painted walls. A room for a son or daughter. She pictured the same thing in another room. She had fantastical thoughts. As they completed their tasks, the clones started to fade away more and more. She was astounded by how fast they had relocated. Hours are derived from days. There was no clone in their new room when Rias moved in. The blankets and sheets were in a box, but the bed was not made. He found her after she busied herself making the bed. There he stood, admiring, silent. What? She inquired. His azure eyes became determined. You know, I never made such a silly promise before, because it never even crossed my mind. Simply because at how stupid I think it is. But this matters to you, and there's really no way to go about it. I'll never have a harem, there. That's a promise. He laughed heartily and stroked the nape on his neck. That felt stupid. She chuckled. He was a man of his word, and it was a promise. He never said he would despise her, and he was too obstinate. Rias approached him and put her arms around him. What if I want one? A harem of you? Naruto flushed. That's the dirtiest thing I've ever heard, whispering. Nobody else will be here, she said. It's our first night in our new home. I think you'll have to make do with one of me. I can do that. I guess we have to make sacrifices, are they though?
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.